when a crippled waitress dared to face the most feared mafia king. Rain, blood, a woman who couldn't run. The night Alessandro Moretti walked into Bellinate restaurant, Clara Rossi made a choice that should have killed her. She stood between a mafia enforcer and an innocent girl, despite her shattered spine. One moment of courage, one glimpse of his dead sister's face, and the devil himself spared an entire restaurant. But mercy in the underworld isn't freedom, it's a death sentence wearing a different mask. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. Stay until the end. The rain came down like bullets on South Harbor, hammering the cracked pavement outside Bellinate restaurant with the kind of violence that matched the neighborhood itself. Clara Rossi stood behind the bar, counting tips that wouldn't cover half her medication, her fingers trembling as they sorted through grease-stained bills and loose change. $23. After a double shift. Her spine screamed with every breath, a constant reminder that 3 years ago a drunk driver had turned her from a promising trauma nurse into a waitress who couldn't stand for more than 4 hours without wanting to die. The cane leaning against her hip wasn't decorative, it was survival. "Clara, table 6 needs water," Michael called from the kitchen, his voice tight with the stress of a Friday night rush. She grabbed the pitcher, feeling the familiar lightning bolt of pain shoot from her lower back down her left leg. The doctors had said she was lucky to walk at all. Lucky. That word tasted like ash in her mouth every single morning when she woke up to agony that no amount of pills could fully erase. The restaurant was packed, which meant good tips if she could make it through the night. Bellinate wasn't fancy. Red vinyl booths with duct tape covering the tears, checkered floor tiles that had gone gray from years of foot traffic, walls decorated with faded photos of Sicily that the owner's grandfather had hung in 1962. But it was loud, warm, and served portions big enough that people kept coming back despite the neighborhood getting worse every year. Clara had just finished refilling water glasses at table 6 when the front door opened. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. She felt it before she saw anything, that primitive animal instinct that recognizes a predator even when your brain hasn't caught up yet. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Even the clatter from the kitchen seemed quiet, as if the building itself was holding its breath. 3 men in dark suits entered first, their eyes scanning the restaurant with the practiced efficiency of people who assess threats for a living. They moved like soldiers, like people who understood violence intimately. One of them had a scar that ran from his ear to his collar. Another had hands the size of dinner plates. Then Alessandro Moretti walked in. Clara had never seen him before, but she knew immediately who he was. Everyone in South Harbor knew the stories, whispered in bars and grocery stores and late-night diners. The man who had consolidated 3 crime families under one banner before he turned 30. The king who ruled the city's underworld with methodical brutality. A man so feared that cops wouldn't even speak his name out loud, just called him the Moretti situation in official reports. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her annual salary, tailored so perfectly it moved with him like a second skin. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been handsome if it wasn't so completely devoid of warmth. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, white against olive skin. But his eyes were what made Clara's breath catch in her throat. Cold. Empty. The eyes of a man who had looked at death so many times he'd become intimate with it. Alessandro Moretti didn't walk through Bellinate. He occupied it, the way a storm occupies the sky. His presence was absolute. The owner, Vincent Torino, came rushing out from the back office, his face pale and sweating. "Mr. Moretti, we weren't expecting— it's an honor, please, the best table." Alessandro raised one hand and Vincent stopped talking immediately. "Just dinner. Quiet corner." His voice was quiet, almost soft. Somehow that made it worse. Vincent personally cleared the best corner booth, practically shoving an elderly couple out of their seats with stammered apologies. Alessandro's men positioned themselves strategically around the restaurant, one by the door, one near the kitchen, one with a clear line of sight to the entire dining room. Clara forced herself to keep moving, delivering orders, refilling drinks, doing her job. But her hands shook. The water pitcher felt like it weighed 50 pounds. Every step sent pain shooting up her spine, but she barely noticed it now, too focused on not looking at the corner booth where Alessandro Moretti sat like a king reviewing his territory. She could feel his presence the way you could feel a loaded gun pointed at your back. "Clara, you okay?" Jessica, the youngest waitress, was barely 22, with bright eyes that hadn't fully absorbed how dangerous the neighborhood had become. She was the kind of girl who still believed people were fundamentally good. "I'm fine," Clara lied, grabbing a tray of pasta dishes for table 9. "Just stay away from that corner booth. Let Vincent handle it." But Vincent was handling it with all the grace of a man disarming a bomb, carefully, terrified, knowing one wrong move could end everything. Clara watched from across the room as Vincent personally delivered wine to Alessandro's table, his hands shaking so badly the bottle rattled against the glasses. One of the enforcers said something too quiet to hear. Vincent nodded frantically and retreated. The restaurant had settled into an uncomfortable rhythm, everyone pretending nothing was wrong while being hyper-aware of the predator in their midst. Clara's leg was screaming now, demanding she sit down, rest, take the pills that were burning a hole in her apron pocket. But she couldn't. Not yet. Just 2 more hours and her shift would end, and she could go home and collapse, and the crash of shattering glass exploded through the restaurant like a gunshot. Jessica had been carrying a tray of wine glasses to the bar when she stumbled, just a simple trip over her own feet. The kind of clumsy mistake that happened a dozen times a night. But the tray went flying, and 6 glasses shattered against the wine rack behind the bar, sending bottles tumbling, glass exploding across the floor in a cascade of red wine and glittering shards. The noise was deafening in the sudden silence. Jessica stood frozen, her face white, staring at the destruction with the horrified expression of someone who just realized they made a very expensive mistake. The enforcer with the dinner plate hands was out of his seat and moving toward her before Clara could even process what was happening. His face was twisted with rage, one hand already reaching for Jessica's arm with the clear intent to drag her somewhere Vincent's insurance couldn't help her. Clara didn't think. She just moved. Her cane hit the floor as she lunged between the enforcer and Jessica, throwing up both hands. The pain in her spine was immediate and catastrophic, like someone had driven an ice pick into her lower back. Her leg gave out completely. She went down hard, her hips slamming into the tile floor with enough force to make her vision white out for a second. When she could see again, she was on her hands and knees, gasping, tears streaming down her face from the pain. Glass glittered around her like broken stars. Wine soaked into her uniform. And the enforcer was standing directly above her, his shadow falling across her like a grave. "Please," Clara heard herself say, her voice breaking. "Please don't hurt her. It was an accident. She's just a kid. I'll pay for the damage. I can't run. Please don't hurt me." The words came out desperate, pathetic, everything she hated about herself since the accident. But Jessica was sobbing behind her, and the enforcer looked like he wanted to break bones, and Clara's body was already broken enough for both of them. "Dominic." One word. Quiet. Almost gentle. Alessandro Moretti's voice cut through the chaos like a knife through silk. The enforcer, Dominic, froze. Then slowly, very slowly, he stepped back. Clara looked up, past Dominic's bulk, to the corner booth where Alessandro sat perfectly still, a wine glass in his hand, his expression unreadable. For a moment, just a heartbeat, something flickered across his face, something that looked almost like pain. Then it was gone, replaced by that same cold emptiness. "Help her up," Alessandro said. Dominic reached down and Clara flinched instinctively, but his grip, when it came, was careful, almost gentle. He lifted her to her feet with surprising ease, steadying her until she could put weight on her good leg. Someone pressed her cane back into her hand. Clara's entire body was shaking. Her hip throbbed. Her spine felt like it was on fire. But she forced herself to look at Alessandro Moretti, to meet those cold eyes, because if she was going to die for protecting Jessica, she at least wanted to die looking at the man who ordered it. He stared back at her for what felt like an eternity. Then he turned to Vincent. "How much is the damage?" Vincent looked like he might cry. The wine rack was antique, the bottles, the glasses. "Maybe 12,000, Mr. Moretti, but please, I'll cover it. You don't have to." "How much does the restaurant owe in total?" The question landed like a bomb. Vincent's face went from pale to gray. His mouth opened and closed several times before words came out. That's not..." Mr. Moretti, I'm working on it. I swear, I just need a few more months. How? Much. 87,000, Vincent whispered, to the Bernardi family, for protection and other arrangements. Clara felt her stomach drop. She knew Vincent was struggling, but she hadn't realized it was that bad. $87,000 might as well have been $87 million for a small restaurant in South Harbor. Alessandro stood up, buttoning his suit jacket with precise movements. He walked toward the bar, his shoes crunching on broken glass. Every eye in the restaurant tracked him. One of his enforcers immediately produced a checkbook and pen. Alessandro wrote something, tore off the check, and handed it to Vincent. The Bernardi debt is now mine. Consider it paid in full. His eyes moved to Clara just for a second. And get your waitress a proper pair of work shoes. Those are going to kill her feet. Then he walked out. Just like that. The three enforcers followed, moving in synchronized formation, and then the door closed and Alessandro Moretti was gone, leaving behind a restaurant full of people who couldn't quite believe what had just happened. Vincent stared at the check in his hand like it might disappear. Then he looked at Clara with an expression somewhere between gratitude and horror. "What did you do?" he whispered. Clara didn't have an answer. She was still trying to figure out how she was alive, standing here on a shattered leg, soaked in wine and adrenaline and the kind of terror that didn't fade quickly. Jessica was crying openly now, apologizing in broken gasps. Clara pulled her into a hug, ignoring the pain screaming through her body, and told her everything was going to be okay. She didn't believe it, but she said it anyway. Bog. The rumors started before Clara even made it home that night. By morning, everyone in South Harbor knew the story, or a version of it. The crippled waitress who stood up to a mafia enforcer. The girl who made Alessandro Moretti blink. The woman who was either blessed or cursed, depending on who was telling the story. Clara's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Her landlord, her physical therapist, her brother Daniel, who she hadn't spoken to in 6 months, suddenly desperate to check in on her. She ignored all of them, swallowing 3 pain pills with black coffee and trying to convince herself that what happened at Belenate was a one-time thing that would blow over. It didn't blow over. When she showed up for her shift Monday evening, the restaurant was nearly empty. 3 tables. On a Monday night, they usually had a waiting list. Vincent pulled her aside immediately, his face haggard. "We need to talk." They sat in the back office, surrounded by stacks of invoices and the smell of old cigarettes. Vincent looked like he'd aged 10 years since Friday. "People are scared, Clara. They think if they eat here, they'll get caught up in whatever this is. Families are staying away. Regulars are finding new places." He rubbed his face. "I don't blame them. When the Morettis take an interest in something, people get hurt." "He paid your debt," Clara said quietly. "He helped us." "Did he?" Vincent met her eyes. "Or did he just buy us? The Bernardi family charged interest. What do you think Alessandro Moretti charges?" Clara didn't have an answer. She went home early, walking the 6 blocks through streets that suddenly felt different. She'd lived in South Harbor her entire life, knew every corner, every shortcut, but now she felt eyes watching her from dark windows and slow-moving cars. Real or paranoid, she couldn't tell. Her apartment was a studio on the 3rd floor of a building that should have been condemned years ago. Leaky ceiling, radiator that clanked, windows that didn't quite seal, but it was hers, paid for with her own money, and no one could take that from her. She was halfway through heating up leftover pasta when someone knocked on her door. 3 sharp raps. Authoritative. Clara's first instinct was to not answer, but the knocking came again, patient and inevitable, and she knew somehow that whoever was outside would wait all night if necessary. She grabbed her cane and limped to the door, checking the peephole. A man in a dark suit stood in the hallway. Not Alessandro. She would have recognized him immediately. This was someone else, younger, with sharp features and eyes that tracked her shadow moving behind the door. "Miss Rossi, my name is Marco Gentile. I work for Mr. Moretti. He'd like to offer you an opportunity." Clara's hand tightened on her cane. "I'm not interested in opportunities. You haven't heard what it is yet. I don't need to. Tell your boss thank you, but I'm fine." Silence on the other side of the door. Then, "You're in pain right now. I can hear it in your voice. Your spine was fractured in 3 places by a drunk driver. You were told you'd never walk again without assistance. The doctors at Harbor General gave you painkillers and physical therapy that didn't work." Clara felt ice slide down her spine. How do you know that? Mr. Moretti knows everything that matters in this city. He also knows that Madison Street Physical Therapy Center has a specialist who works with professional athletes. Dr. Chen has a 92% success rate with spinal injuries like yours. Mr. Moretti would like to arrange for you to see him. I can't afford. Already handled. 3 sessions a week for 6 months. Transportation provided. All costs covered. Clara's breath caught. She'd heard of Dr. Chen. Every patient at Harbor General Physical Therapy had heard of him. The miracle worker who charged $1,500 an hour and had a waiting list 2 years long. Why? She asked. Why would he do this? The silence stretched longer this time. Because you protected someone weaker than yourself despite being unable to run. Because you reminded him that mercy still exists. Marco's voice softened slightly. And because you're the first person in a very long time who looked at him with compassion instead of fear. I was terrified. But you still stood up. Clara leaned her forehead against the door, her mind racing. Every instinct screamed that accepting gifts from a mafia boss was dangerous, that nothing in life was free, especially not from men like Alessandro Moretti. But 6 months of real treatment, a chance to walk without pain, maybe even a chance to go back to nursing someday, to reclaim the life the accident had stolen. Hope was a vicious thing. First appointment is Wednesday at 10, Marco said. Car will be downstairs at 9:30. You don't have to decide tonight, but Dr. Chen doesn't keep slots open long. Footsteps retreated down the hallway. Clara stood there for a long time, one hand pressed against the door, feeling her spine throb with every heartbeat, tasting possibility and terror in equal measure. Opto. She went. Wednesday morning, Clara stood on the curb outside her building at 9:25, wearing the least damaged pair of jeans she owned and a sweater that didn't have any visible stains. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. A black town car pulled up exactly at 9:30. The driver, an older man with kind eyes and gray hair, got out and opened the door without a word. The interior smelled like leather and money. They drove through neighborhoods that got progressively nicer, leaving behind the cracked pavement and boarded windows of South Harbor for tree-lined streets and buildings that didn't sag. Madison Street Physical Therapy Center occupied the ground floor of a glass and steel medical complex that looked like it belonged in a different city entirely. Dr. Anthony Chen was in his 50s, with careful hands and a direct way of speaking that Clara appreciated immediately. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Let me see you walk." Clara crossed the examination room, feeling his eyes track every hitch in her gait, every compensation her body made for the damaged vertebrae. By the time she turned around, he was already making notes. "You've been managing pain instead of healing," he said. "Your body built a fortress around the injury site. Scar tissue, muscle imbalances, compensatory patterns. We're going to tear that fortress down and rebuild properly." "Will it hurt?" "Yes." He looked up from his notes. "A lot, especially the first month. But I don't lie to patients, Miss Rossi. If you commit to this, really commit, there's an 87% chance you'll regain full mobility. No cane, no daily pain. You might even be able to stand through an entire shift without wanting to die." Clara felt tears burn behind her eyes. "When do we start?" "Right now." The next 90 minutes were some of the most painful of Clara's life. Dr. Chen put her through assessments that found every weakness, every guarded movement, every place her body had learned to cheat. By the end, she was sweating, shaking, close to tears. "Good," Dr. Chen said, like he'd just watched her run a marathon. "You didn't quit. That's the only thing that matters. See you Friday." The car was waiting outside. Clara collapsed into the back seat, every muscle trembling, but underneath the pain was something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. The driver caught her eye in the rearview mirror. "Good session?" "Brutal," Clara admitted. "But yes." He smiled. Dr. Chen doesn't waste time on patients he doesn't think can make it. If he's working with you, it means he believes you'll succeed. Clara looked out the window, watching the city slide past. "How long have you worked for Mr. Moretti?" 17 years. "What's he like, really?" The driver was quiet for a long moment. "He's a man who values loyalty above everything else, a man who keeps his word, for better or worse, and a man who carries ghosts that most people couldn't survive." "That's not really an answer. It's the only one I have." They dropped her at her building. Clara made it up to her apartment, swallowed 4 ibuprofen, and fell into bed fully clothed. Her phone was full of missed calls, Daniel again, Vincent, two numbers she didn't recognize. She ignored all of them and fell into dreamless sleep. The pattern established itself over the next 2 weeks. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The car arrived at 9:30. Dr. Chen worked her like a prize fighter preparing for a championship, finding pain she didn't know existed and forcing her body to heal properly instead of just cope. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. She worked at Belinate, where business stayed slow, and Vincent looked increasingly worried, and every night she felt eyes watching her. It wasn't paranoia. Marco appeared periodically, always maintaining a careful distance, always polite. "Just making sure you're safe," he'd say when she confronted him about following her home. "Safe from what?" "From people who might think getting to you is a way to get to Mr. Moretti." The words chilled her. "That's insane. He barely knows me." Marco gave her a look that suggested she was being deliberately naive. "The entire city watched him pay $87,000 because you stood between his enforcer and a scared girl. Whether you like it or not, Miss Rossi, you're associated with him now. That makes you valuable, and valuable things attract dangerous attention." He wasn't wrong. Clara started noticing cars that drove too slowly past her building, men who seemed to be loitering on her block without purpose. Once, she could have sworn someone had been inside her apartment. Nothing taken, nothing disturbed, but items shifted slightly, like someone had searched carefully and tried to cover their tracks. She mentioned it to Dr. Chen during a session. "Tell Marco," he said immediately, hands still working on her hip flexors. "Don't downplay it. Don't assume you're imagining things. These are serious people in a serious world." "I didn't ask for any of this. No one ever does." He helped her into a stretch that made her spine crack. "But here you are anyway. Question is, what are you going to do about it?" "What can I do? I'm a waitress with a broken back." "You're a former trauma nurse with advanced medical training who threw herself in front of a mafia enforcer to protect someone weaker. Stop selling yourself short." The words hit harder than the physical therapy. That night, walking home from Belinate in the rain, Clara finally let herself think about what her life had become. A month ago, she was invisible. Another struggling person in a city full of them, trying to survive on minimum wage and prescription painkillers. Now she was caught in the orbit of a man who ruled through violence, accepting treatments she couldn't afford, watched by men with guns. And the worst part? She didn't hate it. The treatments were working. She could already feel the difference. Less pain, more flexibility, moments where she almost forgot to compensate for her injury. Dr. Chen said if she kept improving at this rate, she might not need the cane by Christmas. But there was something else, something she didn't want to examine too closely. Alessandro Moretti had looked at her with those cold, empty eyes, and for just a second she'd seen something human underneath, something broken and buried, but not quite dead. She thought about that moment more than she wanted to admit. The confrontation came on a Thursday night in mid-November. Clara was closing Belinate with Vincent and Jessica when 3 men walked in 5 minutes before they were supposed to lock the doors. Not Alessandro's crew. These were different. Younger, hungrier, with the kind of swagger that came from not understanding consequences yet. The one in front had a gold chain and a smile full of teeth. "We're here about the protection money." Vincent went pale. "The debt's been paid. Mr. Moretti took care of it." "Not to the Bernardi family." Gold Chain's smile widened. "To us. New management in this neighborhood. Everyone pays, even restaurants under Moretti protection." Clara felt her stomach drop. This was a test, someone challenging Alessandro's authority by going after a business he'd publicly claimed. Either he'd respond with force or he'd look weak, and weakness in the underworld was blood in water. "How much?" Vincent's voice shook. $2,000 a week. That's impossible. I can't. Then I guess we'll have to take it out and trade. Gold Chain's eyes slid to Clara, lingering in a way that made her skin crawl. "I hear you got a pretty waitress who's real popular with the Moretti crew." Jessica made a small, scared sound. Clara's hand tightened on her cane, adrenaline flooding her system. Every self-defense instinct from her nursing days kicked in. Find exits, assess threats, protect the vulnerable. "Get out," she said. Her voice didn't shake. Gold Chain laughed. "Or what, cripple? You gonna stand between us like you did with Dominic? That trick only works once." You're right, said a new voice from the doorway. It only works once. Everyone froze. Alessandro Moretti stood in the entrance, rain dripping from his coat, flanked by 4 men who looked like they'd stepped out of a nightmare. Dominic was there, along with Marco and 2 others Clara didn't recognize. The temperature in the room plummeted. Alessandro walked forward slowly, each footstep deliberate. He stopped in front of Goldchain, who suddenly looked a lot less confident. You came into a business under my protection, Alessandro said quietly. You threatened people I've claimed. You put your hands near something that belongs to me. His eyes were flat, empty, utterly terrifying. Explain why I shouldn't remove your hands right now. We didn't know. The word was okiyu. The word was what? That I've gone soft? Alessandro tilted his head slightly. Let me clarify. I paid this restaurant's debt because I chose to. That makes it mine. The people who work here are mine, and anyone who threatens what's mine answers to me personally. He turned his head slightly, not even looking at Clara directly, but the intention was clear. That includes her. Is that understood? Goldchain was sweating now. Yes, Mr. Moretti, absolutely. We'll leave right now. Burrow. No. Alessandro's voice dropped even quieter. You'll deliver a message first to whoever sent you, to their bosses, to anyone else who thinks testing me is a good idea. Tell them Alessandro Moretti doesn't bluff. Tell them I've killed men for less than what you attempted tonight. And tell them if anyone touches Clara Rossi, I will burn their entire organization to the ground and dance on the ashes. The silence was absolute. Then Alessandro nodded, and his men moved. They didn't hurt Goldchain or his companions, not really, just escorted them out with the kind of grip that promised worse things if they ever came back. When they were gone, Alessandro turned to Vincent. You'll find an extra security system installed by tomorrow. 2 men will be stationed outside from now on. If anyone threatens you again, call Marco immediately. Thank you, Mr. Moretti. Thank you so much. Alessandro held up a hand, cutting off Vincent's gratitude. Then finally, he looked directly at Clara. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Up close, she could see details she'd missed that first night. The exhaustion in his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the way he held himself like a man who expected violence from every direction and had stopped caring about it a long time ago. You should go home, he said. It's not safe tonight. It's never safe, Clara heard herself reply. Something flickered across his expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. No, it's not. Then why do this? Why protect a random restaurant? Why pay for my treatments? She hadn't meant to ask. The words just came out, months of confusion and fear and desperate hope bubbling over. Alessandro was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was so soft she almost didn't hear him. Because you reminded me that some things are still worth protecting. Then he turned and walked out into the rain, his men following like shadows, leaving Clara standing in the empty restaurant with her heart pounding and the certainty that her life had just changed forever. Marco drove her home personally that night. You need to understand something, he said as they pulled up to her building. What Mr. Moretti did tonight, claiming you publicly like that, it means you're under his protection now, really, truly under it. No one will touch you, but it also means you're part of his world whether you want to be or not. Clara stared at the rain-slicked streets. What if I don't want to be? Then you should have stayed down that first night. He wasn't wrong. Clara went upstairs, locked her door, and stood in the dark for a long time, trying to process everything that had happened. Alessandro Moretti, the man whispered about in fear across the entire city, had publicly declared her off-limits, had threatened violence against anyone who touched her, had looked at her like she was something rare and worth protecting. She didn't know what terrified her more, the danger she was now in, or the small, traitorous part of her that felt safer than she had in years. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Miss Rossi? A woman's voice, professional, slightly accented. This is Dr. Sarah Kim from Harbor General. I'm calling about your brother Daniel. He was brought into the ER an hour ago. He's stable, but he's asking for you. Clara's blood went cold. What happened? He was assaulted. Multiple contusions, possible broken ribs. He's refusing to tell us who did it or file a police report, But he keeps saying he needs to talk to you, says it's urgent. Clara's hands were shaking as she grabbed her jacket and cane. I'm on my way. She made it downstairs and halfway to the street before she realized Marco's car was still there, idling at the curb. The window rolled down. Where? He asked simply. Harbor General, my brother. Marco didn't ask questions, just opened the door. They made the drive in tense silence, Clara's mind racing. She and Daniel had been close once before the accident, before everything fell apart. But the last few years had opened chasms between them. His drinking, her pain, mutual resentment over lives neither of them wanted. Now he was hurt and asking for her, and she had no idea why. Harbor General's ER was chaos as always. Screaming kids, drunk adults, the smell of antiseptic, and desperation. Clara knew these halls intimately from her nursing days. Walking through them now felt like visiting a grave. Daniel was in a curtained bay in the corner, his face swollen and bruised, one eye completely shut. His torso was wrapped in bandages. When he saw her, something in his expression cracked. Clara, Jesus, Clara, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She pulled a chair close, her professional instincts kicking in despite everything, assessed his injuries with practiced eyes. Who did this to you? Doesn't matter. It matters to me. Daniel grabbed her hand with his uninjured one, gripped desperate. You need to stay away from Alessandro Moretti. You need to quit Belinate, leave South Harbor, go somewhere else. Anywhere else. Clara felt ice slide down her spine. Why? Daniel, what's going on? I can't... He broke off, wincing. I did something stupid, Clara, years ago. Really stupid. And now it's coming back and you're in the middle of it and I can't... Slow down. What did you do? But Daniel just shook his head, tears streaming down his battered face. Just promise me you'll stay away from him. Promise me, Clara. That man is dangerous in ways you can't understand. Before she could respond, the curtain pulled back. Alessandro Moretti stood there, absolutely still, his expression unreadable. Behind him, Marco waited with the careful stillness of a man ready for violence. Daniel's face went white. No, please, I didn't tell her anything, I swear. I know, Alessandro said quietly. He looked at Clara. We need to talk, privately. Everything in Clara wanted to refuse, but the look in Alessandro's eyes wasn't threatening. It was something worse. It was sad. She followed him out of the ER, through the parking lot to a black SUV parked away from the lights. Marco stayed behind, giving them space. Rain hammered the roof of the vehicle, creating a cocoon of sound. Alessandro was quiet for a long time before he spoke. 8 years ago, your brother worked for my organization, he said finally. Low level, courier work mostly. He was good at it, reliable, quiet. Then he got desperate for money and did something monumentally stupid. Clara's throat was dry. What did he do? Sold information about our operations to a rival family. Shipment routes, meeting locations, personnel files. 3 of my men died because of what he gave them. 2 more barely survived. The words landed like punches. Clara couldn't breathe. I found out. I was going to kill him. Alessandro's voice was flat, matter of fact. That's what happens to traitors in my world. No exceptions. But when I went to his apartment to handle it personally, I found a photograph of him with a younger girl, his sister. You were 16, maybe 17 in the picture, wearing scrubs, holding a nursing school acceptance letter. Claire remembered that photo, remembered that day, the moment she thought her entire future was locked in and certain. He begged me, Alessandro continued, not for his own life, for yours. Said you didn't know anything about his work, that you were good, that you were going to save lives. Asked me to let him live long enough to make sure you were okay. So you spared him. I broke both his legs instead. Told him if he ever came near my organization again, I'd finish the job. Told him to disappear, get clean, and stay away from his sister until he was someone worth knowing again. Clara felt tears burning. He never told me. He protected you the only way he knew how, by staying away. Alessandro finally looked at her directly. But now you're in my world anyway, because you protected someone weaker, because you looked at me like I was still human, because of 1,000 small choices that led us to this moment. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know who you're accepting help from. What your brother did. What I am. His expression was bleak. I'm not a good man, Clara. I've done things that would give you nightmares. But I keep my word. And I told you I'd keep you safe. Rain hammered harder against the roof. Your brother was beaten by members of the Calibri family, Alessandro said. They know you're under my protection. They're testing to see how I'll respond. This is their warning shot. Warning shot at what? At me. At my authority. At the idea that I might have gone soft. He smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Clara had ever seen. They think protecting you is weakness. They're wrong, but they're going to push until I prove it. Clara's hands were shaking. So what happens now? Now I make an example of the men who touched your brother, and I increase your security, and we see if you're brave enough to keep going to physical therapy 3 times a week while a war starts around you. I'm not brave, I'm terrified. You stood between Dominic and a crying girl despite not being able to run. That's the definition of brave. Alessandro reached for the door handle. The choice is yours. I can have you relocated somewhere safe, set you up with money and a new start. Or you can stay and see this through. But you need to decide now, because after tonight, the city gets dangerous. Clara thought about Dr. Chen, about walking without pain for the first time in years, about Jessica and Vincent in Belenate, about a life spent running from everything because her body was broken and the world was cruel. About Alessandro Moretti looking at her like she was something precious when no one else had looked at her like anything except broken for 3 years. I'm staying, she said. Something in Alessandro's expression shifted. You're either very brave or very stupid. Maybe both. He almost smiled. Almost. I'll have additional security assigned. Don't go anywhere alone. Don't trust anyone you don't know. And if something feels wrong, call Marco immediately. Okay. Alessandro opened the door, then paused. Your brother really does love you. He just loved himself less. That's why he couldn't be around you. How do you know? Because I had a sister once, and I would have burned the world down to keep her safe. His voice went very quiet. But I failed. So now I understand exactly how your brother feels. Then he was gone, disappearing into the rain, leaving Clara alone in the SUV with revelations that rewrote her entire understanding of the last 8 years. Marco drove her home in silence. She made it upstairs, locked her door, and finally let herself break down. Everything was connected. Daniel's disappearance, her years of struggling alone, the man who now protected her. It all traced back to one moment of desperate betrayal 8 years ago that had rippled outward like a stone thrown into dark water. And now Clara stood at the center of the ripples, with no idea how deep the water really went. Clara didn't sleep that night. She sat on her couch watching the rain streak down her window, Daniel's battered face superimposed over every shadow, Alessandro's words echoing in her skull like gunshots. By the time pale gray light bled through the clouds, she'd consumed an entire pot of coffee and made a decision that terrified her. She was going to physical therapy. The Blacktown car arrived at 9:30 as always. A different driver today, younger, with a neck like a tree trunk and eyes that never stopped moving. He introduced himself as Tony and said nothing else for the entire drive. Dr. Chen took one look at her face and frowned. You didn't sleep? No. Personal crisis or injury related? Does it matter? Yes. Because if it's injury related, we modify the session. If it's personal, we work harder so you have something else to focus on. He gestured to the treatment table. Which is it? Clara thought about Alessandro standing in the rain, about Daniel's desperate warnings, about the entire house of cards her life had become. Personal. Good. Then we're doing deep tissue work today. It's going to hurt like hell. He wasn't lying. For 90 minutes, Dr. Chen systematically dismantled every protective pattern her body had built around the injury site. His hands found knots she didn't know existed, trigger points that made her gasp, adhesions that felt like they were being torn apart. Sweat soaked through her shirt. Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes, but she didn't quit. You're stronger than you think, Dr. Chen said as she was leaving, her muscles trembling like she'd run a marathon. Most people tap out during deep tissue. You just breathe through it. I've had worse pain. I know. That's why you'll heal. He handed her a bottle of water. Drink this. Take a hot bath tonight. And Clara? Whatever's happening in your personal life, be careful. You're starting to move like someone who's not afraid anymore. That's good for healing, dangerous for everything else. Tony drove her home in silence. When they pulled up to her building, he finally spoke. Mr. Gentile wants to brief you on the new security protocols. He's upstairs. Clara's apartment suddenly felt less like refuge and more like a cage with bars she couldn't see yet. Marco was sitting in her kitchen when she walked in, drinking coffee from her chipped mug like he owned the place. He stood when she entered, gesturing to the chair across from him. New rules, he said without preamble. No going anywhere alone. Tony or another driver takes you everywhere. Work, therapy, grocery store. Doesn't matter. Your phone now has a panic button. Hold down the power and volume buttons simultaneously for 3 seconds. It sends an emergency signal directly to our response team. Response time is under 4 minutes anywhere in South Harbor. Clara sank into the chair, exhaustion crashing over her. This is insane. This is survival. The Calibri family made their move on your brother. Next, they'll try something more direct. We need to be ready. Why me? I'm nobody. Marco's expression softened slightly. You stopped being nobody the second you stood up for that waitress. Mr. Moretti doesn't protect people lightly. When he does, it means something, and his enemies know it. Clara stared at her hands. They were still shaking from the therapy session, or the fear, or both. What happened to his sister? Lucia? The question landed heavy. Marco was quiet for a long moment, his jaw tight. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. That's not my story to tell. But I'll say this. Lucia's death broke something fundamental in Mr. Moretti. Before her, he was ruthless but rational. After? Marco shook his head. After, he became the man people whisper about in the dark. The one who doesn't just kill enemies, he erases them. Their families, their businesses, their legacies. Nothing left but scorched earth and warnings. And now he's protecting me because I remind him of her. No. Marco met her eyes directly. He's protecting you because you reminded him that not everyone in this world is broken beyond repair. That mercy isn't always weakness. Lucia would have done the same thing you did, thrown herself between violence and innocence without hesitation. Seeing you do it woke something up in him that's been dead a long time. I didn't ask for any of this. None of us do. Marco stood, leaving the coffee mug on her counter. But here we are. Tony will be outside whenever you need to go somewhere. Keep your phone charged. And Clara, if you see your brother again, call me immediately. Don't tell him anything about your schedule, your security, nothing. The Calibri family might use him to get to you. He wouldn't. He already did. Once. 8 years ago. Desperate people make the same mistakes twice. Marco headed for the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I think you're good for him. Mr. Moretti, I mean. He's been more human the last few weeks than I've seen him in years. That scares his enemies, which means it's good for all of us. Then he was gone, leaving Clara alone with her exhaustion and a phone that could summon armed men in under 4 minutes. She took Dr. Chen's advice and ran a bath as hot as she could stand, sinking into water that turned her skin pink and made her muscles finally unlock. But her mind wouldn't quiet. Every noise from the hallway made her tense. Every shadow felt malevolent. She'd been invisible for so long, just another broken person in a broken neighborhood, surviving day to day. Now she was visible, protected, valuable, and somehow that felt more dangerous than being forgotten. Bakat. Work that evening was surreal. 2 men in dark suits sat in a booth near the door, nursing coffee and watching everything with predator eyes. Vincent had stopped asking questions and just accepted that Belinate was now under the kind of protection that made other restaurants in the neighborhood jealous and terrified in equal measure. Jessica kept shooting Clara worried looks between tables. Finally, during a lull, she cornered Clara by the coffee station. Are you okay? Like, really okay? Clara forced a smile. I'm fine. You're not fine. You've got bodyguards and you look like you haven't slept in days, and people keep whispering about... Jessica lowered her voice. About you and Mr. Moretti. There is no me and Mr. Moretti. But he paid off Vincent's debt because of you, and he threatened to burn down anyone who touches you. That's not nothing, Clara. It's complicated. It's terrifying. Jessica's eyes were bright with fear and fascination. I heard he killed a man with his bare hands once, just for disrespecting him in public. Clara thought about Alessandro standing in the ER parking lot, rain-soaked and hollow-eyed, talking about his dead sister, about the careful way he'd looked at her, like she was something precious and fragile. People tell a lot of stories, Clara said quietly. doesn't mean they're all true. But some of them are. Clara couldn't argue with that. The shift dragged. Her body ached from the therapy session, her spine a constant low throb that reminded her she was still healing, still broken, still a long way from whole. But she could feel the difference now, subtle improvements in how she moved, moments where the pain receded enough that she almost felt normal. Dr. Chen was giving her hope, and hope was a dangerous addiction. Around 9, Vincent called her into his office. He looked older than he had a month ago, worry etched into the lines around his mouth and eyes. "I need to tell you something," he said, closing the door, "and I need you to understand I'm only saying this because I care about you." Clara's stomach dropped. "Okay. People are talking about you and Moretti, about how much money he's spending on your treatments, how much security, how much attention. And the things they're saying," Vincent ran a hand through his thinning hair, "they're saying you're his mistress, his kept woman, that you seduced him to get out of poverty." The words hit like a slap. "I barely know him. I've spoken to him maybe 3 times. I know that, but perception is reality in this neighborhood. And right now the perception is that you're sleeping with a mafia boss to get ahead." Vincent's expression was pained. "I don't believe it. I've known you for 3 years. But other people, they see the expensive physical therapy, the bodyguards, the way he claimed you publicly, and they draw their own conclusions." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks, anger mixing with humiliation. "Let them talk. I'm not doing anything wrong. You're accepting gifts from a dangerous man. That's not wrong, but it's not innocent either." Vincent leaned forward. "I'm not judging you, Clara. I'm warning you. Because when you're connected to someone like Alessandro Moretti, everyone watches, everyone judges, and everyone assumes the worst. Then they're idiots. Maybe. But they're idiots with opinions that could get you hurt." Vincent's voice dropped. "There are men in this city who would love nothing more than to prove Moretti's gone soft by hurting someone he's protecting. You need to be careful, more careful than you've ever been in your life." Clara left his office feeling like the walls were closing in. She finished her shift on autopilot, collecting tips she barely counted, avoiding Jessica's concerned glances, hyper-aware of the guards at the door tracking her every movement. Tony drove her home through streets slick with rain. The city looked different now, every alley a potential ambush, every stranger a possible threat. South Harbor had always been rough, but Clara had navigated it with the kind of resigned familiarity that came from a lifetime in the same neighborhood. Now, everywhere felt hostile. She made it upstairs, locked her door, and was halfway through changing into pajamas when her phone rang. Unknown number. Her first instinct was to ignore it, but something made her answer. "Clara Rossi?" A man's voice, unfamiliar, with a slight accent she couldn't place. "Who is this?" "A friend of your brother's. He asked me to call. Says he needs to see you tonight. Says it's urgent." Every warning alarm in Clara's head started screaming. "Tell him to call me himself." "Can't. He's hurt too bad to use his hands. But he's at St. Michael's Church on 4th Avenue. Says you'll know where that is. Says he'll wait for you there until midnight. I'm not going anywhere tonight." "He said you'd say that. Said to tell you it's about Lucia Moretti." The name stopped Clara's heart. "Said you need to know the truth before it's too late." The line went dead. Clara stood frozen, phone still pressed to her ear, mind racing. This was a trap. Had to be. But what if it wasn't? What if Daniel really did know something about Alessandro's sister, something that mattered? She thought about Marco's warning. Don't see your brother. Don't trust unexpected calls. Don't go anywhere alone. Then she thought about Alessandro's face when he talked about Lucia. The grief, the rage, the fundamental brokenness. She grabbed her jacket and cane, her hand shaking as she dialed Marco's number. It went to voicemail. She tried Tony next. Same thing. The panic button on her phone glowed softly, mocking her. 3 seconds to summon help. But help for what? To stop her from making a stupid decision? To protect her from herself? Clara knew what the smart move was. Stay home. Call again in the morning. Trust the security systems in place. Instead, she went downstairs and started walking toward 4th Avenue. St. Michael's Church had been abandoned for 5 years. Its congregation dissolved, its building left to rot while the city argued about zoning and preservation. Clara had passed it 1,000 times, barely noticing the boarded windows and graffiti-tagged walls. Now it loomed against the night sky like a broken tooth, dark and jagged and wrong. The rain had stopped, leaving everything slick and reflecting streetlight in yellow pools. Clara's cane tapped against wet pavement as she approached, every instinct screaming at her to turn around. But she kept walking, drawn forward by desperate curiosity and the slim hope that Daniel really did have answers. The front doors were chained shut, but a side entrance hung open, its lock broken. Clara pushed through, stepping into darkness that smelled of mold and decay. "Daniel?" Her voice echoed in the empty space. No answer. She pulled out her phone, using its flashlight to navigate between rows of broken pews. Stained glass windows were shattered, leaving colored shards scattered across the floor like frozen tears. The altar at the front was covered in graffiti, profane messages spray-painted over what had once been sacred space. "Daniel, if you're here, answer me. I'm not playing games." Movement in the shadows. Clara spun, raising her cane defensively. A figure stepped into her phone's light. Not Daniel. Rocco Dinelli. She recognized him from that night at Bellinate. One of Alessandro's inner circle stood 15 feet away, hands in his coat pockets, expression unreadable. "Clara Rossi," he said, almost conversationally. "You're either very brave or very stupid to come here alone." Clara's grip tightened on her cane, her heart hammering. "Where's my brother?" "Safe. Probably. Depends on how the next few minutes go." Rocco stepped closer, slow and deliberate. "See, we've got a problem. Your boyfriend's getting soft, making decisions with his heart instead of his head. That's dangerous in our line of work." "He's not my boyfriend, but he protects you like you are. Threatens to burn down families over you. Spends money he should be using to expand territory on your medical treatments." Rocco's smile was cold. "That makes you a liability, and liabilities need to be eliminated." Clara backed up, her injured leg screaming with each step. "You work for him. You're betraying him. I'm saving him. From himself. From the weakness that gets kings killed." Rocco pulled a gun from his coat, casual as pulling out a phone. "Nothing personal. You seem nice, but nice doesn't survive in our world." The gun was pointed at her chest. Clara's entire body went cold, adrenaline flooding her system so completely she couldn't feel her injuries anymore. "He'll kill you for this," she said, surprised her voice didn't shake. "Maybe, but he'll be alive to do it. That's what matters." Rocco's finger moved toward the trigger. "Close your eyes. I'll make it quick." Clara thought about the panic button. 3 seconds. Could she press it in time? Would help arrive before she bled out on a church floor? Then light flooded the space, blinding and sudden. "Drop it, Rocco." Alessandro's voice, flat and deadly, cut through the darkness like a knife. Rocco spun, gun swinging toward the entrance where Alessandro stood flanked by Marco and Dominic. For a frozen moment, everyone was a statue, balanced on the edge of violence. Then Rocco laughed, bitter and sharp. "Should have known. Should have fucking known she'd be bait." "She didn't know," Alessandro said, stepping forward. His face was a mask of controlled rage. "But I did. Been watching you for weeks, waiting for you to make your move. Wanted to see how far you'd go. Far enough to save you from yourself." Rocco kept the gun trained on Clara. "You're weak now. Everybody sees it. You spare a waitress, pay her bills, threaten wars over someone who means nothing. She means everything." The words hung in the air like a bomb. Rocco's expression cracked. "What?" "She means everything." Alessandro's voice was quiet, terrible. "And you put a gun to her chest. So now there's no negotiation, no mercy, no second chances." "Boss, I'm trying to help." "You're trying to kill the only thing that makes me human anymore." Alessandro moved closer, each step measured. "So here's what happens. You drop the gun, you walk out of here, and tomorrow you and everyone who helped you with this disappear. Leave the city, leave the state, leave my sight forever. And if I don't? Then Dominic puts 3 bullets in your spine, and we leave you here to think about your choices while you bleed out." Alessandro's eyes were empty, inhuman. "Your call." Clara watched Rocco's face cycle through emotions. Fear, anger, calculation, desperation. The gun wavered. Then he did the stupidest thing possible. He pulled the trigger. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space. Clara felt the bullet pass so close to her head she could sense the displaced air. Then she was on the ground, tackled by Marco, his body covering hers as gunfire erupted through the church. She couldn't see anything, just heard the staccato explosions, smelled cordite, felt Marco's weight pressing her into the floor. It lasted maybe 5 seconds, felt like hours. Then silence. Marco helped her up carefully. "You hurt?" "I don't think so." Clara's ears were ringing. Her hands shook, but she didn't feel any pain beyond the usual throb in her spine. Rocco was on the ground, very still, blood pooling beneath him. Dominic stood over the body, gun still raised, expression neutral. Alessandro stood apart, staring at Rocco's corpse like it was a puzzle he was trying to solve. "Check him," Alessandro said quietly. Dominic knelt, pressed fingers to Rocco's neck, then shook his head. Alessandro finally turned to Clara. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm okay." "You're not okay. You're in shock." Alessandro moved closer, his hands hovering near her arms but not touching, like he was afraid she'd break. "Why did you come here? Marco told you to call if anything felt wrong." "I did call. Neither of you answered." Claire's voice came out too loud, pitched high with adrenaline. "He said Daniel was here, said it was about your sister. I couldn't just—" "So you walked into an ambush alone." Alessandro's control finally cracked, anger bleeding through. "Do you understand how close you came to dying? If we'd been 30 seconds later, but you weren't. Because I had Marco tracking your phone the moment you left your building. Because I've had men watching you every second since last night." Alessandro's jaw was tight, his eyes blazing. "You think the panic button was your only protection? You think I'd leave you that vulnerable?" Clara stared at him, trying to process. "You've been watching me? The whole time?" "Every second you're not in a secured location. I don't take chances with things He broke off, breathing hard. "With people under my protection." The almost confession hung between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Marco cleared his throat. "Boss, we need to move. Neighbors probably called the shots in. Handle it. Make it disappear." Alessandro looked at Rocco's body one more time, his expression hollow. 12 years. He was with me for 12 years, and he was willing to kill an innocent woman to save me from my own humanity. "He was wrong," Clara said quietly. "Was he?" Alessandro's eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw genuine uncertainty there. "Maybe I am weak now. Maybe protecting you is the mistake that gets me killed. Every enemy I have thinks so." "Then let them think it. Doesn't make it true." "You don't understand this world, Clara. Weakness gets exploited. Sentiment gets weaponized. Love—" He stopped himself. "Caring about someone makes you vulnerable in ways you can't imagine." "So what? You just stop caring? Stop being human? Turn yourself into a monster because it's safer?" "I'm already a monster." The words were flat, factual. "I've killed men, tortured them, destroyed families, burned businesses to the ground. The only reason you don't see me that way is because I've been careful to protect you from who I really am." Clara thought about what she'd seen in his eyes that first night. The crack in his armor when he looked at her. The ghost of the man he might have been before grief broke him. "I see exactly who you are," she said. "A man who paid a stranger's debt because she reminded him kindness exists. Who spent a fortune on medical treatments for a waitress with a broken back. Who just offered mercy to a traitor who held a gun to my head. That's who you are. Everything else is just armor you wear to survive." Alessandro stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out and touched her face, his fingers careful against her cheek. The gesture was so tender it made her breath catch. "You're going to get me killed," he said softly. "Or save your life. Hasn't been decided yet." The almost smile that crossed his face was the saddest thing Clara had ever seen. "We need to leave," Marco said again, more urgently. "Now." The ride back was silent, except for the hum of the engine and the fading ringing in Clara's ears. Marco drove while Dominic sat in the passenger seat, speaking quietly into his phone in a language Clara didn't recognize. Alessandro sat beside her in the back, close enough that she could feel his presence but not touching, staring out the window at the city sliding past. They didn't go to her apartment. Instead, they pulled up to a high-rise in the financial district, glass and steel, and the kind of architecture that cost more than Clara would earn in 10 lifetimes. A private elevator took them to the top floor, opening directly into a penthouse that looked like something from a magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. Furniture that was probably art. Everything white and chrome and spotlessly clean except for a single photograph on the side table. A young girl with dark hair and Alessandro's eyes, smiling at the camera. Lucia. "You'll stay here tonight," Alessandro said, his voice flat with exhaustion. "Guest room is down that hall. Whatever you need, tell Marco. In the morning, we'll discuss long-term security." "I need to go home." "Your home isn't safe. Rocco wasn't working alone. There are others in my organization who think protecting you is weakness. Until I root them all out, you stay here." Clara wanted to argue, but exhaustion was crashing over her in waves, adrenaline burning off and leaving her hollow. Her leg throbbed, her hands were still shaking. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Tonight, but tomorrow we'll talk." Alessandro looked at her, and something in his expression made her chest tight. "I'm sorry, Clara, for all of this. You deserved a normal life, not this." "Normal life stopped being an option when a drunk driver hit my car." Clara met his eyes. "At least this way, I'm choosing the danger instead of having it chosen for me." She thought he might argue. Instead, he just nodded, a small gesture that felt like acceptance. Then he turned and walked toward what she assumed was his bedroom, leaving her alone in a penthouse that cost more than her entire neighborhood. Marco showed her to the guest room, king bed, attached bathroom with a tub bigger than her entire apartment's bathroom, closet full of new clothes in her size that made her realize exactly how much surveillance Alessandro had ordered. "Everything you need should be here," Marco said. "If it's not, call me. I'm 3 doors down." "How many people live here?" "Just Mr. Moretti, and now you, temporarily." Marco paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I think you're good for him. He's been half dead since Lucia died. You're the first person who's made him remember what living feels like." "I don't want to be his dead sister's replacement." "You're not. You're something different, something new." Marco's expression was kind. That's why it terrifies him. After he left, Clara sat on the bed, trying to process everything. The trap, the gunshots, Rocco's body on the church floor, Alessandro's hand against her face. "You're going to get me killed. Or save your life." She didn't know which one was true. Maybe both. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. "Your brother is safe. For now. But next time we won't miss. Stop seeing Alessandro Moretti or Daniel Diaz. You have 48 hours to decide." Clara stared at the message, ice sliding down her spine. The Calibri family. Had to be. They'd orchestrated everything, the fake call, the trap, probably paid Rocco to turn traitor. And now they had Daniel. She thought about showing Alessandro, about using the resources he'd put at her disposal. But the message was clear. Involving him would get her brother killed. For the first time since the accident, Clara wished she was the person she'd been before. The trauma nurse who made life-or-death decisions without hesitation, who understood how to function in crisis, who knew how to save people. Instead, she was a broken waitress caught between a mafia boss who thought she was worth dying for and a crime family that would kill her brother to prove a point. She had 48 hours to figure out how to save Daniel without getting Alessandro killed, and she had absolutely no idea how. Clara didn't sleep. Instead, she paced the guest room, her cane tapping against hardwood floors, her mind racing through possibilities and discarding them all as suicide. By the time pale light started filtering through the windows, she'd formed the rough outline of a plan that terrified her. She was going to trade herself for Daniel. It was stupid, suicidal, exactly what Alessandro had spent the last month trying to prevent. But it was the only way she could see to protect both of them, let the Calibri family have her, and maybe Alessandro would cut his losses and move on instead of starting a war over a waitress. She was composing the text message when the bedroom door opened without knocking. Alessandro stood in the doorway, barefoot, wearing sweatpants and an undershirt, his hair disheveled from sleep. He looked almost human like this, almost vulnerable. "You've been pacing for 3 hours," he said. "I can hear it through the walls. What's wrong?" Clara looked at him, at the scar through his eyebrow, at the exhaustion in his eyes, at the careful way he held himself like a man expecting violence from every direction. Then she made a choice. She showed him the message. Alessandro read it once, his expression going very still. Then he read it again. When he finally looked up, his eyes were completely empty. When did you receive this? Around midnight. And you didn't tell me immediately because? Because they said they'd kill him if I involved you. Claire's voice came out steady despite the fear. And I'm not letting anyone else die because of me. So your plan was what? Trade yourself? Walk into their hands and hope they honor their word? Alessandro's control was fracturing, anger seeping through. Do you have any concept of what they'd do to you before they killed you? What they'd make me watch? I have to try. He's my brother. He's a traitor who put you in danger 8 years ago and is being used as bait now. Alessandro stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. And you're not trading anything. You're staying here, under guard, while I handle this. By starting a war? By ending one. His voice went quiet, deadly. The Calibri family has been testing me for months, pushing boundaries, using you and your brother as pawns. It stops tonight. More people will die. Yes, they will. That's how this world works. Alessandro's eyes were flat, inhuman. But you won't be one of them. That's not negotiable. Clara felt anger rise to match his. You don't get to decide that. You don't get to choose who lives and dies based on who you're protecting. Daniel is the only family I have left. If there's even a chance— There isn't. Alessandro cut her off, his voice brutal. They have no intention of letting him live. Or you. This message is a trap designed to make you panic and do something stupid, which apparently it's working. Then what's your solution? Let them kill him while I hide in your penthouse? My solution is to make them disappear so completely their own families forget they existed. Alessandro's expression was terrifying. But that takes time. And in the meantime, you stay here, safe, alive. End of discussion. I'm not one of your soldiers you can just order around. No, you're worse. He stepped close enough that she could feel his breath. You're someone I actually care about. Which means I can't afford to be rational when it comes to your safety. Which means you're staying here even if I have to lock you in this room. They stared at each other, neither backing down, the air between them electric with tension and fear, and something else Clara didn't want to name. I can't just let him die, she said, her voice breaking. You won't. I'll get him back. Alessandro's hand came up to her face again, that same careful touch. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Clara thought about every reason she shouldn't trust a mafia boss who killed people for a living. Then she thought about the way he'd looked at her in that church, the way he'd offered mercy to a traitor until that traitor put a gun to her chest, the way he touched her like she was something precious. 48 hours, she said. If Daniel's not safe by then, I'm doing this my way. 36 hours, Alessandro countered, because I'm not giving them a full 48 to hurt him worse. It wasn't a promise, but it was close enough. Clara nodded, exhaustion finally overwhelming fear. Alessandro guided her to the bed, his hands careful, and for a moment she thought he might stay. Instead, he pulled a blanket over her and stepped back. Get some sleep. I'll have updates by this afternoon. Alessandro? She caught his hand before he could leave. Don't get yourself killed saving my brother. He wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want that. Something shifted in his expression, vulnerability bleeding through for just a second. I've been half dead for 12 years. Maybe it's time to find out if I remember how to actually live. Then he was gone, closing the door softly behind him, leaving Clara alone with hope and terror braided so tightly she couldn't tell them apart. She finally fell asleep as dawn broke over South Harbor, dreaming of gunshots and churches, and a man who looked at her like she could save him from his own darkness. Outside, the city woke up to a war it didn't know had already started. And Clara Rossi, the broken waitress who couldn't run, lay at the center of it, wondering if Alessandro Moretti was her salvation or her destruction, or maybe both. Clara woke to voices bleeding through walls, low, tense, the kind of argument that happened in careful whispers because the stakes were too high for shouting. She checked her phone, 2 in the afternoon. She'd slept 6 hours and felt like she'd been hit by a truck. Her spine screamed when she sat up, punishment for yesterday's adrenaline and the hard fall to the church floor. She swallowed 3 pills dry, grabbed her cane, and limped toward the voices. Alessandro's penthouse office was all dark wood and leather, walls lined with books that looked actually read instead of decorative. He stood behind a massive desk covered in photographs and documents, Marco and Dominic flanking him. All three men looked up when she entered. "You should be resting," Alessandro said. "Can't rest when my brother's being held hostage." Clara moved closer, her eyes scanning the photographs spread across the desk. Surveillance shots of warehouses, shipping yards, faces she didn't recognize. "What did you find?" Alessandro exchanged a look with Marco, some silent conversation Clara couldn't read. Then he sighed, rubbing his face with both hands in a gesture of exhaustion that made him look almost human. "Daniel's being held in a warehouse near the docks. Calibri family territory, 4 guards minimum, possibly more. They're using him as bait. They want me to come personally so they can eliminate both of us at once." "So we go in smart," Clara said. "Surveillance, planning, overwhelming force. We're not going anywhere." Alessandro's voice was flat. "I'm sending a team. You're staying here. He's my brother." "Which is exactly why you can't be there. If things go wrong, if you're hurt or killed, I'll lose focus. My men will die trying to protect you instead of completing the mission. You're a liability in the field." The words stung because they were true. Clara knew nothing about tactical operations or gunfights. She'd be dead weight, a distraction, exactly the kind of weakness that got people killed. "Then let me talk to them," she said desperately. "Let me negotiate. Maybe I can—" "They don't negotiate. They kill." Alessandro's eyes were cold. "This isn't a medical emergency you can talk through, Clara. This is war. And in war, caring about people makes you vulnerable." "So what was last night? You said you cared about me." "I do. Which is why you're not leaving this building." Alessandro's jaw was tight. "Marco and Dominic will handle the extraction. I'll coordinate from here, and you'll stay in the guest room where I know you're safe." Clara wanted to scream, wanted to throw something, wanted to do anything except stand uselessly in a penthouse while her brother was tortured in a warehouse. But Alessandro's expression made it clear the discussion was over. Marco touched her arm gently. "We'll get him back. I promise." Promises in this world didn't mean much. But Clara nodded anyway, because what else could she do? She retreated to the guest room, pacing like a caged animal, checking her phone every 30 seconds for updates that didn't come. The walls felt like they were closing in. Every minute that passed was another minute Daniel was suffering. Another minute closer to the Calibri family deciding he was more useful dead than alive. Around 4, her phone rang. Unknown number. Her hand trembled as she answered. "Miss Rossi?" A woman's voice, professional, unfamiliar. "This is Dr. Kim from Harbor General. I'm calling about your brother." Clara's blood turned to ice. "What happened?" "He was brought in about 20 minutes ago. Multiple gunshot wounds, severe trauma. He's in surgery now, but it's critical. You should come immediately." The phone slipped from Clara's fingers, clattering against the hardwood. Daniel was shot. Daniel was dying. While she'd been sleeping in Alessandro's penthouse, her brother had been bleeding out. She grabbed her jacket and cane, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip the door handle. Marco was in the hallway immediately, his expression alert. "Where are you going?" "Hospital. Daniel's been shot. I have to—" "Wait." Marco's hand on her arm was gentle but firm. "Let me confirm this." "What hospital?" "Harbor General. Dr. Kim called. She said surgery. She said critical." Marco was already on his phone, speaking rapid Italian to someone. His expression grew darker with each passing second. Finally, he looked at Clara, his face grim. "There's no patient named Daniel Rossi admitted to Harbor General. No Dr. Kim on staff." The words didn't make sense. Clara stared at him, her mind refusing to process. "But she called. She said, 'It's a trap.'" Alessandro's voice came from behind her, cold and terrible. "They're trying to draw you out. Get you away from protection so they can take you." Clara felt the world tilt. "But what if it's real? What if he really is dying and I don't go? Then he dies. But you live." Alessandro moved closer, his presence overwhelming. "That's the calculation. That's the choice. Welcome to my world, Clara. This is what caring about people costs." The cruelty of it took her breath away. She wanted to hit him, to scream, to make him understand that Daniel was her only family, the only person left who knew her before the accident, before the pain, before everything turned to survival and medication and broken dreams. But Alessandro's eyes told her he already understood, and that he'd made this calculation 1,000 times before, always choosing the same way. Survival over sentiment, protection over feeling, the living over the dead. "I hate you," Clara whispered. "I know." Alessandro's expression didn't change. "But you're alive to hate me. That's what matters." He turned and walked away, leaving Clara standing in the hallway, with Marco's careful hand still on her arm, and the knowledge that she was completely, utterly powerless. Night fell over South Harbor like a burial shroud. Clara sat in the guest room, staring at her phone, waiting for updates that came in fragments and codes she didn't understand. Marco checked in every hour with information that was either too vague or too brutal. 7. Teams in position. 8. Contact made, resistance heavier than expected. 9. 3 hostiles down, no sign of the package. Package. Like Daniel was cargo instead of a person, like he was an objective instead of her brother. Around 10, Alessandro appeared in her doorway, his face haggard. He didn't say anything, just stood there, and Clara knew immediately that something had gone catastrophically wrong. "Tell me," she said. "They didn't find him. The warehouse was a decoy, empty except for the guards." Alessandro's voice was flat, emotionless. "We've been chasing shadows while they moved Daniel somewhere else." Clara felt something break inside her chest. "So where is he?" "We don't know. They're using him as leverage now. They want a meeting. Me, personally, alone. Tomorrow at midnight. Location to be determined." "It's a trap." "Obviously." Alessandro moved into the room, closing the door behind him. "But they have what I need, so I'm going." "You'll die." "Probably." He said it like he was discussing the weather. "But maybe I can negotiate his release first. Get him to safety before they kill me." Clara stared at him, trying to process the calm way he was discussing his own execution. "You can't. There has to be another way." "There isn't. Not anymore." Alessandro sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly looking every one of his years and then some. "This is what happens when you care about people in my world, Clara. They become weapons, tools, ways to destroy you." "Then stop caring." Too late for that. He met her eyes, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw genuine fear there. "I'm already destroyed. Been destroyed since the moment you stood up for that waitress. Since I saw Lucia's face in yours. Since I realized I wasn't as dead inside as I thought." Clara's throat was tight. "This is my fault. If I just stayed down that night, then you'd be dead or broken or disappeared, and I'd still be the empty thing I was before." Alessandro's smile was bitter. "At least this way I got to remember what feeling something was like, even if it kills me. That's not romantic, it's stupid. Most romantic things are." They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of tomorrow's execution hanging between them. Outside, the city glittered like broken glass, beautiful and sharp, and completely indifferent to the small human dramas playing out in its shadows. "What was she like?" Clara asked quietly. "Lucia, really?" Alessandro was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then slowly, he pulled out his wallet and extracted a photograph. Worn soft from years of handling, the colors faded. A teenage girl with wild dark hair and Alessandro's eyes, laughing at something off camera. She was fearless, reckless. Used to sneak out at night to feed stray cats in the neighborhood. His voice was soft, distant. She wanted to be a veterinarian, had already been accepted to 3 programs. Then she got caught in the crossfire of a war I started, and all those dreams died with her on a sidewalk while I held her, and couldn't do anything except watch her bleed out. Clara took the photograph carefully, studying the girl's face. "She looks like trouble." "She was. The best kind." Alessandro's expression cracked. "I've spent 12 years becoming the kind of monster that could prevent what happened to her from happening again. Built an empire on fear so complete that everyone in this city knows crossing me means death. And it worked. For 12 years, it worked. Until me. Until you." He looked at her, and his eyes were wet. "You made me remember why I built all this in the first place. To protect people who couldn't protect themselves. To make the world less cruel for people like Lucia, who just wanted to feed stray cats and save animals. I forgot that somewhere along the way. Forgot the point of all the violence and fear. Then you stood up despite being broken, and I remembered. Clara felt tears burning. I'm not her. I can't be her replacement. You're not. You're something different, something new. Alessandro wiped his face roughly. But you reminded me that the world still has people worth dying for. So tomorrow, I'm going to die making sure your brother gets home safe. That's the deal. I won't let you. You can't stop me. He stood, suddenly all business again, the vulnerability locked back behind armor. Marco will take you back to your apartment tomorrow afternoon. You'll have security for another month while things settle. After that, you're free. The medical treatments are paid through completion. There's money in an account under your name, enough to start over somewhere else if you want. Alessandro. Don't. His voice was sharp. Don't make this harder than it is. I'm giving you your life back. Just take it and go. He left before she could argue, the door closing with the finality of a coffin lid. Clara sat alone in the dark, holding the photograph of a girl who'd died 12 years ago and feeling like history was about to repeat itself in the worst possible way. She didn't sleep. Instead, she planned. By the time gray light filtered through the windows, Clara had made several decisions that would either save everyone or kill them all. She got dressed, her hands steady now, adrenaline and desperation burning away fear. She had maybe 12 hours before Alessandro walked into his execution. 12 hours to do something impossibly stupid. Marco was in the kitchen drinking coffee when she emerged. He took one look at her face and sighed. Whatever you're thinking, don't. I need to see my brother's apartment. There might be information there, numbers he called, people he contacted, something that could help locate where they're holding him. The apartment was already searched by our people. Nothing. Then they didn't know what to look for. Clara's voice was steady. I grew up with Daniel. I know his hiding places, where he'd stash things he didn't want found. Give me 2 hours. If I find nothing, I'll come back quietly. Marco studied her for a long moment. You're planning something. I'm planning to save my brother without letting Alessandro die, that's all. It was technically true. Marco knew it was also technically bullshit, but after a long moment he nodded. 2 hours. And I'm coming with you. They drove through morning traffic to Daniel's apartment in Riverside, a studio even smaller and sadder than Clara's, with water-stained ceilings and the smell of mold. Clara had been here maybe twice since the accident. Daniel had made it clear he didn't want her seeing how far he'd fallen. Now, searching through his things, she understood why. Empty bottles everywhere. Pill bottles from 3 different doctors, betting slips and pawn receipts, the debris of a life spiraling out of control. But there was also a photograph tucked into his bathroom mirror, Clara in her nursing scrubs, smiling from before the accident. Like he'd needed to see her face every morning. A reminder of what he'd almost destroyed 8 years ago. Clara felt her chest tighten. Whatever mistakes Daniel had made, he'd tried to protect her in his own broken way. That had to count for something. She found what she was looking for in the freezer, hidden in a bag of ancient peas. A burner phone, still charged. She powered it on, scrolling through recent calls. Most were to numbers she didn't recognize, but one stood out. A text from yesterday. Just 3 words. Pier 17. Midnight. Alone. Clara's blood ran cold. This wasn't a message to Daniel. It was from him. To someone. Instructions for the meeting Alessandro was supposed to attend, which meant Daniel had known about the trap, had helped set it up. Marco. Her voice came out strangled. Look at this. Marco read the message, his expression growing darker. Then he was on his phone speaking rapid Italian. Clara heard Alessandro's name, heard cursing. We need to leave, Marco said. Now. What does this mean? It means your brother isn't a hostage. Marco's voice was tight. He's working with the Calibri family. Has been for weeks, maybe longer. He set up the ambush at the church. The fake hospital call. All of it. Clara felt the world tilt. No, that's impossible. He betrayed the Morettis once. Why wouldn't he do it again? Because he loved her. Because he'd stayed away for 8 years to protect her. Because the photograph in his bathroom mirror meant something. Except none of that mattered if he'd decided betrayal was worth whatever the Calibri family was paying. They were halfway to the car when Clara's phone rang. Daniel's number, real this time. She answered, her hand shaking. Clara. Daniel's voice was rough, desperate. Oh God, Clara, you need to listen to me. Don't trust Moretti. Don't trust any of them. They're using you. Where are you? Doesn't matter. I'm safe. But you're not. As long as you're with him, you're a target. The Calibri family, they promised. They said if I helped them get to Moretti, they'd let both of us go. Give us money to start over somewhere else. We could leave South Harbor. Leave all of this. Clara felt ice slide through her veins. So you did betray him. You're helping them kill him. I'm helping us survive. Daniel's voice cracked. He's a monster, Clara. He killed 3 men because of me. Broke my legs. Do you know what that's like? Do you know what I've lived with for 8 years? You sold information that got his people killed. What did you expect? I expected to be executed. But he let me live because of you, because you were 16 and innocent and needed your brother. Then you grew up and met him anyway, and now you're protecting him like he's some kind of hero. He's not. He's a killer who's going to get you murdered. So your solution is to murder him first? My solution is to save the only family I have left. Daniel was crying now. Come with me, Clara. Right now. We can disappear. The Calibri family has everything arranged. New identities, money. We can start over. Clara looked at Marco, who was listening to every word, his expression unreadable. And what happens to Alessandro? She asked quietly. He dies. Tonight. At Pier 17. The Calibri family has 30 men positioned. He won't make it 10 feet. Daniel's voice dropped. But that's not our problem. We didn't ask to be dragged into his world. We don't owe him anything. He paid for my medical treatments, kept me safe, offered mercy to a traitor. He did all of that because you remind him of his dead sister. You're a replacement, Clara, a substitute for someone he loved. That's not protection, that's obsession. The words hit like bullets. Clara felt her carefully constructed understanding of the last month crack and splinter. You're lying. I'm telling you the truth no one else will. Alessandro Moretti doesn't care about you. He cares about not failing to save someone again. You're his second chance at redemption, not a person. And when you inevitably get hurt because that's what happens to everyone in his world, he'll have failed twice. That's what this is really about. Clara's vision was blurring. I don't believe you. Then ask him. Ask him if he sees you or Lucia when he looks at you. Ask him if he'd care about a crippled waitress if she didn't have his dead sister's face. Ask him, Clara. And when he can't answer, you'll know I'm right. The line went dead. Clara stood frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear, Daniel's words echoing in her skull like poison. Marco was watching her carefully, his expression sympathetic. He's manipulating you, Marco said quietly, trying to make you doubt. That's what the Calibri family does. They find fractures and exploit them. But what if he's right? Clara's voice broke. What if Alessandro only cares because I remind him of Lucia? What if I'm just a substitute for his guilt? Does it matter? He's still keeping you alive, still protecting you. It matters if I'm not actually a person to him. If I'm just a ghost he's trying to save. Marco was quiet for a long moment. Then, carefully, Mr. Moretti lost the most important person in his life and spent 12 years making sure it never happened again. When he saw you stand up despite being broken, yeah, maybe it reminded him of Lucia. Maybe that's what caught his attention first. But what kept his attention was you. Who you are, not who you remind him of. How do you know? Because I've worked for him for 17 years. I've seen him around hundreds of women. He's never looked at any of them the way he looks at you, like you're the first real thing he's seen in years. Marco's expression was gentle. Your brother's scared and desperate and saying whatever he thinks will make you run. Don't let him. Clara wanted to believe him, but doubt was corrosive, eating away at certainty. They drove back to the penthouse in silence. Alessandro was in his office, surrounded by maps and documents, planning his own execution with the methodical care of a man who'd accepted his fate. He looked up when they entered, his eyes immediately finding Clara's face. What happened? My brother called. Clara's voice was steady despite everything. He's working with the Calibri family. He set up the ambush, the hospital call, all of it. And tonight at Pier 17, he's helping them kill you. Alessandro's expression didn't change. I know. The words hit like a slap. You know? Found out this morning. One of our informants confirmed it. Alessandro's voice was flat. Your brother made a deal with them weeks ago. They promised him money and safe passage out of the city in exchange for helping them eliminate me. He's been feeding them information about your schedule, your security, everything. And you didn't tell me? I was going to. After I handled it, Alessandro's eyes were cold. Didn't want you to have to carry the knowledge that your only family betrayed both of us. Clara felt something break inside her chest. He said you only care about me because I remind you of Lucia, that I'm just a replacement, a second chance at redemption. The silence that followed was devastating. Alessandro looked away, his jaw tight. He didn't deny it, didn't argue, just stood there, and his silence was confirmation enough. Is it true? Clara's voice was barely a whisper. At first, Alessandro met her eyes again. Yes. When I saw you throw yourself between Dominic and that girl despite your broken body, it reminded me of every reckless, fearless thing Lucia used to do. For about 10 seconds, I saw my sister's face instead of yours. Clara felt tears burning. But then you looked up at me, Alessandro continued, his voice rough. And you asked me not to hurt you because you couldn't run. And I saw someone who'd survived something that should have destroyed her and was still trying to protect people weaker than herself. That wasn't Lucia. That was you, Clara Rossi, someone I didn't know yet but wanted to. How do I know you're telling the truth? How do I know this isn't just you trying to keep your redemption project alive? You don't. Alessandro's expression was bleak. You're going to have to decide whether to trust a mafia boss who kills people for a living or your brother who's betrayed everyone who ever cared about him. Not exactly a great choice either way. Clara wanted to scream, wanted to break something, wanted to go back to that night at Bellinite and make different choices so she wouldn't be standing here trying to decide which man was lying to her. What happens now? She asked. Now I go to Pier 17 and end this. Alessandro's voice was matter of fact. Your brother wants me dead. The Calibri family wants me dead. Might as well give them all what they want. That's suicide. That's strategy. They think I'm walking in alone and vulnerable. They're wrong. Alessandro's smile was terrifying. I've been planning wars since before your brother learned how to betray people. Tonight, I'm going to teach him, and the Calibri family, what happens when you underestimate them already. You'll die. Maybe. But I'll take enough of them with me that the message is clear. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming, and you'll be safe. That's what matters. Stop saying that! Clara's control finally broke. Stop acting like dying for me is some noble sacrifice. I'm not worth starting a war over. I'm not worth any of this. That's where you're wrong. Alessandro's hand came up to her face, gentle despite everything. You're worth exactly this much. Worth protecting. Worth dying for. Worth remembering what being human feels like. His eyes were bright. Whether I care because you remind me of Lucia or because you're yourself doesn't change the calculation. You deserve to live. I'm making sure that happens. End of story. Clara stared at him, this man who'd killed and destroyed and built an empire on fear, who was now calmly discussing his own execution like it was a necessary business transaction. There has to be another way, she whispered. There isn't. Not anymore. Alessandro leaned forward and kissed her forehead, gentle and final. But thank you for making the last month of my life feel like living instead of just existing. Then he was gone, walking toward his death, leaving Clara standing in his office with Marco's careful hand on her shoulder and the certainty that everything was about to end in blood. She looked at Marco. We have to stop him. We can't. He's already decided. Then help me decide differently. Clara's voice was steel. Because I'm not letting him die, and I'm not letting my brother murder him, which means I'm doing something monumentally stupid and I need your help. Marco studied her face for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. What did you have in mind? Pier 17 sat at the edge of the harbor, a collection of rotting warehouses and rusted shipping containers that hadn't seen legitimate business in a decade. It was the kind of place where bodies got dumped and no one asked questions. Perfect location for an execution. Clara arrived at 11:15, 45 minutes early, using the service entrance Marco had mapped out. Her legs screamed with every step, but she ignored it, adrenaline overwhelming pain. She was dressed in dark clothes Marco had provided, a bulletproof vest hidden under her jacket, her phone set to record everything. This was the stupidest thing she'd ever done. It was also the only thing that might work. She found Daniel in Warehouse 3, exactly where Marco's surveillance had predicted. He was sitting on a crate, smoking a cigarette with shaking hands, looking 10 years older than the last time she'd seen him upright. "Clara." His voice was hoarse. "What are you doing here?" "Stopping you from making the biggest mistake of your life." Clara moved closer, her cane tapping against concrete. Again. Daniel stood, his face cycling through shock and fear, and something that might have been relief. "You need to leave. Now. Before they get here. Before you help murder the man who's been keeping me alive." Clara's voice was cold. "Before you betray the only person who showed you mercy when he should have killed you. Before you destroy the last person in this city who still believes people can be more than their worst moments." "He's a killer, Clara. So are you. You sold information that got 3 people murdered. You helped set a trap that almost got me shot in a church. You're working with the family that wants to torture me before they kill me. Don't pretend this is about morality." Daniel flinched like she'd hit him. "I'm trying to save us." "You're trying to save yourself. I'm just the excuse." Clara stepped closer. "You could have called me any time in the last 8 years. Could have been honest. Could have been the brother I needed instead of a ghost who blamed me for his own failures. I stayed away to protect you." "You stayed away because you couldn't face what you'd done." Clara's voice broke. "And now you're doing it again. Using me as justification for betrayal. Telling yourself it's for my own good when really you just want the Calibri family's money and a fresh start somewhere else where no one knows what you are." Daniel's face crumpled. "I'm sorry, God, Clara. I'm so sorry. For all of it. For 8 years ago. For now. For not being the person you deserved." "Then prove it." Clara grabbed his arm. "Help me. Help me save Alessandro instead of killing him. Show me you can be better than your worst choice." "It's too late. They're coming. 30 men. Maybe more. Even if I wanted to help, there's nothing." "There's always something." Clara pulled out her phone, showing him the recording app. "Tell me everything. Where they're positioned. How many. What the plan is. Give me something I can use." Daniel stared at the phone, then at Clara, his expression tortured. For a moment she thought he'd refuse. Thought 8 years of guilt and resentment had poisoned him too completely to save. Then, slowly, he started talking. He told her about the 30 men positioned throughout the warehouses, the snipers on the roofs, the kill box they'd created in the center of the pier, the signal, 2 flares, that would start the ambush the moment Alessandro entered the designated zone. He told her about the Calibri family's plan to film the execution and distribute it across the underworld as proof that the Moretti Empire was finished. About the price on Clara's head, $50,000 to whoever delivered her alive. He told her everything, his voice breaking, tears streaming down his face. And Clara recorded every word. When he finished, she stopped the recording and looked at her brother, really looked at him, maybe for the first time since before the accident. "You can't stay here," she said quietly. "After tonight, both families will want you dead. The Calibri for betraying them. The Morettis for what you've already done." "I know." Daniel wiped his face. "I'll run. Disappear. It's what I'm good at." "Or you could testify. Give Marco everything you know about the Calibri family's operations. Help tear them down from the inside." Clara's voice was steady. "One good choice. That's all I'm asking. Make one good choice before you disappear." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. "Okay, one good choice. For you." Clara heard footsteps, multiple people, moving through the warehouse. "Hide. Now. And when this is over, find Marco. He'll know what to do with your information." Daniel hugged her suddenly, desperately, smelling of cigarettes and fear and regret. "I love you, Clara. I'm sorry I was never good enough to show it." Then he was gone, disappearing into the shadows, leaving Clara alone with 30 seconds before the Calibri family arrived and her monumentally stupid plan either saved everyone or killed them all. She took a deep breath, steadied herself on her cane, and walked toward the center of the pier, toward the kill box, toward 30 armed men who wanted her dead. And she smiled because she was done being the helpless victim everyone thought she was. Tonight, the broken waitress was going to remind South Harbor exactly how dangerous a woman with nothing left to lose could be. Clara stepped into the kill box with her cane tapping against concrete, each step deliberate, her spine screaming but her face calm. Overhead lights buzzed and flickered, casting shadows that moved like living things between shipping containers stacked 3 high. The air tasted like rust and salt water, and the particular kind of fear that came before violence. She could feel eyes tracking her from a dozen positions. Rooftops, container gaps, darkened doorways, the Calibri family's 30 men waiting for Alessandro Moretti to walk into their trap. Instead, they got a crippled waitress who shouldn't have been there at all. "Well?" a voice echoed from somewhere ahead. "This is unexpected." A man emerged from behind a container, 50-something, expensive suit, silver hair combed back like he was attending a business meeting instead of an execution. Vincent Calibri himself. Clara recognized him from photographs Marco had shown her. The patriarch. The strategist. The man who'd ordered her brother tortured and used as bait. "Miss Rossi." Vincent smiled, but his eyes were flat and cold. "Where's Alessandro?" "Not here." Clara's voice was steady. "Because I'm making you a better offer." Vincent laughed, and the sound echoed off metal walls. Other men started emerging from shadows, dark shapes with guns circling slowly, cutting off every exit. Clara counted 12 visible, which meant 18 more hidden, waiting for the signal. "A better offer," Vincent repeated, "from a waitress who can barely walk. This should be entertaining. You want Alessandro dead because he's too powerful, too unpredictable. He protects people instead of exploiting them, which makes him dangerous to your business model." Clara kept her voice level, channeling every ounce of confidence she didn't feel. "But killing him starts a war. His lieutenants will come for you. The other families will see an opening and attack everyone. This city will bleed for months. That's a risk we're willing to take. But you don't have to take it, because I'm offering you something better." Clara met Vincent's eyes directly. "Me. Let Alessandro live. Let my brother go. And I'll testify that he's been trafficking drugs through your warehouses, that he's been paying off federal judges, that he ordered the execution of a police captain's son." The lies came easily, smooth as silk. Marco had coached her on exactly what accusations would trigger federal investigations that even the Calibri family couldn't buy their way out of. Vincent's smile faded. "You're bluffing. I have recordings, documents, witness testimony from people in your organization." Another lie, but her voice never wavered. "Enough to put you away for 20 years minimum. Enough to dismantle your entire operation from the inside. If you had that kind of evidence, you'd have used it already. Not if it meant Alessandro dying before I could." Clara took a painful step forward. "But if you let him live, I'll give you everything. You avoid a war, avoid federal prosecution, and you get to stay exactly where you are, powerful, untouchable, alive." Vincent studied her face for a long moment. Then he laughed again, harder this time. "You've got steel, girl, I'll give you that. Walking into a kill box with nothing but lies and nerve." He pulled a gun from his jacket, pointing it casually at her chest. "But I'm not interested in deals. I'm interested in sending a message. And that message is written in Moretti blood." Clara heard the metallic click of safeties being released all around her. 12 guns, maybe more, all aimed at the spot where she stood. This was it. The moment her stupid plan either worked or got her killed. She pressed the button in her pocket. The signal Marco had given her. The one connected to the wire she was wearing, broadcasting everything to the response team positioned 3 blocks away. And to Alessandro himself, wherever he was. "Last chance," Clara said quietly. "Let us go, or I burn your entire organization to the ground." "With what? You're bluffing. You have nothing." "She has me." Alessandro's voice came from everywhere and nowhere, echoing through the warehouse like the voice of a vengeful ghost. Vincent spun, his gun tracking shadows, and Clara saw genuine fear cross his face for the first time. Then the lights went out, complete darkness. Clara dropped immediately, her cane clattering away, ignoring the pain that exploded through her spine as she hit concrete. Gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes painting the darkness in stuttering yellow-white, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Men screamed. Orders were shouted in Italian. More gunfire, coming from different angles now, and Clara realized Alessandro's team had been positioned all around them the entire time, waiting for her signal. She'd walked into the trap knowing it was a trap, trusting that Alessandro would come for her anyway. And he had. Something grabbed her arm in the darkness. She almost screamed before Marco's voice whispered in her ear, "Stay down. Don't move. Don't make a sound." The firefight lasted maybe 90 seconds. Felt like hours. Clara pressed herself against cold concrete, hands over her ears, trying to make herself as small as possible while bullets tore through the air above her head. Then silence. Sudden and absolute. Emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in red. Bodies on the ground. She counted 7, no 8, blood pooling under them in spreading darkness. The rest of Calibri's men had retreated or surrendered, hands up, weapons dropped. Vincent Calibri was on his knees, Alessandro's gun pressed against the back of his head. "You used her as bait," Alessandro said quietly. His voice was conversational, almost friendly, which somehow made it more terrifying. "Knew I'd come for her. Counted on it." "You used her too," Vincent spat. "Put her in the middle of your war, got her involved in things she didn't understand. The difference is, I was protecting her." Alessandro's finger moved to the trigger. "You were going to kill her, after you tortured her, after you filmed it and sent it to me as a message. It's just business, nothing personal." "Everything is personal." Alessandro's voice went flat, dead. "Ask the 8 men bleeding out on this floor. Ask them if it felt like business when my bullets tore through them." Clara struggled to her feet, her leg almost giving out completely. Marco caught her, supporting her weight, but she shook him off, limping toward Alessandro through the carnage. "Don't," she said. "Don't kill him." Alessandro didn't move, didn't look at her, just kept the gun pressed against Vincent's skull. "He tried to murder you." "I know, but killing him makes you exactly what everyone says you are." Clara moved closer, each step agony. "You told me you wanted to remember what being human felt like. Humans don't execute people on warehouse floors. Monsters do, and I've been a monster for 12 years. Then stop being one." Clara's voice broke. "Please, for me, stop being the thing that killed your sister." That got through. Alessandro's expression cracked, pain bleeding through the emptiness. His hand trembled, just slightly, but he didn't lower the gun. "She died because I wasn't monster enough," he said quietly. "Because I showed mercy to someone who didn't deserve it, and they used that mercy to kill the only person I loved. I swore I'd never make that mistake again." "I'm not asking you to show mercy to him," Clara gestured at Vincent. "I'm asking you to show it to yourself. To choose being the man Lucia would have wanted you to be instead of the monster her death created." The red emergency lights painted everything in shades of blood and shadow. Alessandro stood frozen, the gun still pressed to Vincent's head, a lifetime of violence and grief warring across his face. Then, slowly, he lowered the gun. Vincent collapsed forward, gasping. "You're under arrest," Alessandro said, his voice empty. "Federal agents have been listening to everything for the last 15 minutes. Your confession about drug trafficking, judge bribery, and conspiracy to commit murder should be enough for a very long sentence." Vincent's face went white. "You're bluffing." "I never bluff." Alessandro gestured to the shadows, and men in FBI jackets emerged, weapons drawn. "The wire Miss Rossi was wearing was broadcasting to both my team and theirs. Everything you said, everything you confirmed, it's all recorded, admissible in court." Clara stared at Alessandro, pieces clicking into place. "You knew. You knew I was going to do something stupid." "Of course I knew." Alessandro finally looked at her, and his eyes were exhausted. "You're predictable in exactly one way. You'll sacrifice yourself to save people you love. So I planned around it, let you walk into the trap knowing I'd be there to pull you out. You used me as bait." "I used your inevitable stupidity as bait. There's a difference." Alessandro moved toward her as FBI agents swarmed Vincent and the surviving Calibri soldiers. "But I was ready to burn this entire pier to the ground if they hurt you, so don't pretend I was being cold-blooded. I was being terrified." Clara wanted to hit him, or kiss him, or both. Instead, she just stood there, shaking, adrenaline finally crashing and leaving her hollow. "My brother," she said. "Where's Daniel?" "Safe. Marco has him." Alessandro gestured to the shadows, and Marco emerged supporting Daniel, who looked like he'd been crying. "He gave us everything. Full testimony about Calibri operations, names, locations, financial records. It'll take years to prosecute it all." Daniel wouldn't meet Clara's eyes. "I'm sorry for everything. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but it's a start. Clara's voice was tired. A start at being someone worth knowing again. FBI agents were everywhere now, securing the scene, photographing bodies, reading rights to men who looked shocked to still be breathing. The warehouse had transformed from an execution ground to a crime scene, evidence markers replacing corpses. An agent approached Alessandro, older woman, sharp eyes, badge displayed prominently. Mr. Moretti, we need your statement. Of course, Agent Williams. I'm always happy to cooperate with federal law enforcement. Alessandro's voice was smooth, professional, the dangerous edge hidden beneath perfect courtesy. Agent Williams didn't look convinced, but she gestured for him to follow her anyway. Before he left, Alessandro turned back to Clara. There's an ambulance outside. You should get that leg checked. You're favoring it more than usual. I'm fine. You're not fine. You just walked into an ambush to save my life. His expression was unreadable. We'll talk later, after the feds are done with both of us. Then he was gone, disappearing into the organized chaos of federal agents and crime scene techs, leaving Clara standing in the red light with Marco's careful hand on her shoulder. Come on, Marco said gently. Let's get you looked at. The ambulance was parked outside, paramedics waiting. Clara let them examine her leg, run their tests, make concerned noises about spinal stress and inflammation. They wanted to take her to the hospital. She refused. She'd spent too many nights in hospitals already. Daniel sat beside her on the ambulance bumper, both of them wrapped in shock blankets like survivors of a disaster, which Clara supposed they were. Where will you go? Claire asked quietly. After this, witness protection probably. New name, new city, new life. Daniel's voice was hollow. FBI says the Calibri family has enough reach that staying here is suicide. Maybe it's for the best. Fresh start somewhere else. Chance to be someone better. Maybe. Daniel looked at her finally. Will you come visit? When things settle down? Clara thought about it. About the 8 years of silence between them. About the betrayals and lies and desperate choices that had brought them to this warehouse floor. Ask me in a year, she said, after you've proven you can actually change. Daniel nodded, accepting the verdict. They sat in silence as the sun started bleeding color into the eastern sky, dawn breaking over South Harbor like a promise or a threat. Alessandro emerged from the warehouse 2 hours later, looking exhausted. Agent Williams was with him, still skeptical but apparently satisfied with whatever he'd told her. You're free to go, Williams said, her tone suggesting she'd prefer otherwise. But stay available. We'll have follow-up questions. Always happy to help, Alessandro said smoothly. Williams gave him a look that said she knew exactly what he was and what he'd done and how little she could prove. Then she walked away, barking orders at younger agents. Alessandro moved to where Clara sat, lowering himself to the bumper beside her with a wince. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in his face, the lines around his eyes, the weight of 12 years of violence finally showing. Hell of a night, he said. Hell of a month. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder, too tired to maintain distance. Did we win? Define winning. Calibri's going to federal prison, his organization's being dismantled. Your brother's getting witness protection and a chance to disappear. You're alive. Alessandro was quiet for a moment. But 8 men died tonight. 30 more are going to prison. And I'm still the monster who orchestrated all of it. You're the monster who chose not to execute a man who deserved it. That's got to count for something. Does it? Or did I just delay the inevitable? Next month, next year, there'll be another Vincent Calibri, another threat, another situation where the only solution is violence. Alessandro's voice was bleak. This is my world, Clara. Blood and threats and choices between bad and worse. You sure you want to be part of it? Clara thought about the question, about everything she'd seen and done in the last month. The fear, the pain, the constant awareness of danger. The way Alessandro looked at her like she was something precious. The way he'd built an entire operation around keeping her safe while she walked into a trap anyway. I'm sure I want to find out, she said finally, if that's an option. Alessandro turned to look at her, surprise flickering across his face. After everything? After seeing what I am, what my world does to people, you're choosing to stay? I'm choosing you. There's a difference. Clara met his eyes. But I'm not choosing blind. I know what you are, what you've done, the darkness you carry. I'm choosing it anyway, choosing you anyway. You're either very brave or very stupid. We've established it's probably both. Clara managed a tired smile. But I walked into a kill box tonight because the alternative was watching you die. So I think we're past the point where I can pretend I'm not invested. Alessandro stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached up and touched her face with careful fingers, like she might break. I don't deserve you, he said quietly. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. Clara turned her face into his palm. At least until my physical therapy is done and I can walk without wanting to die. After that, we'll renegotiate. The almost smile that crossed Alessandro's face was the first genuine one she'd seen from him. Tired, sad, but real. Deal. Dawn was fully breaking now, red and gold light spilling across the harbor, making the water look like it was on fire. Police lights still strobed in the background. FBI agents were still processing the scene. But for a moment, sitting on an ambulance bumper wrapped in shock blankets, Clara felt something that might have been peace, or at least the possibility of it. Marco appeared with coffee from somewhere, probably bribed an agent, and handed cups to both of them. Boss, they're ready to take Miss Rosie's full statement. Tell them she needs medical clearance first, and food, and about 12 hours of sleep. Alessandro's voice held command despite the exhaustion. Already told them that. They're not happy about it. They never are. Alessandro stood, offering Clara his hand. She took it, letting him help her up, feeling every injury and exhaustion in her body, but also feeling oddly light. Like something heavy she'd been carrying for years had finally been set down. They walked toward the black SUV Marco had positioned away from the chaos. Daniel was already inside, head against the window, either asleep or pretending to be. The sun was fully up now. South Harbor waking to a world where the Calibri family was in custody and Alessandro Moretti had somehow become a federal cooperating witness. The neighborhood would talk about this night for years. The shootout at Pier 17, the crippled waitress who walked into a kill box, the mafia boss who chose arrest over execution. But right now, Clara was just too tired to care what people would say. She slid into the SUV, her body screaming gratitude at the leather seats. Alessandro sat beside her, maintaining careful distance, but his hand finding hers in the space between them. Where to? Marco asked from the driver's seat. Alessandro looked at Clara. Your choice. Hospital, your apartment, my penthouse. Whatever you need. Clara thought about her small studio with its leaky ceiling and broken radiator, about Alessandro's penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows and photograph of Lucia, about hospitals and statements and federal agents with skeptical eyes. Bellinate, she said. I want to go to Bellinate. See if Vincent still has a restaurant after tonight. See if I still have a job. Alessandro looked surprised, then almost smiled again. You just survived a firefight, and you want to go to work? I want to go somewhere normal, where I'm just Clara the waitress, not Clara the bait, or Clara the witness, or Clara the whatever else I've become. She squeezed his hand. Just for an hour. Then you can take me wherever you want, and I'll give statements until the feds are satisfied. 1 hour, Alessandro agreed. Then you're getting actual medical attention whether you like it or not. Marco drove them through morning traffic, the city slowly coming alive, people heading to work with no idea what had happened at the docks while they slept. Clara watched South Harbor slide past, her neighborhood familiar and worn and dangerous and home. Bellinate restaurant looked exactly the same as always. Red vinyl booths with duct tape, checkered floors gone gray, faded photographs of Sicily on the walls. Vincent was inside, prepping for the breakfast shift, and his face when he saw them was worth documenting. Clara, Mr. Moretti. Vincent looked between them, confusion and relief warring across his features. I heard there were reports of a shooting. Federal agents, I thought. We're fine, Clara said. Calibri family's in custody. The protection debt's still paid. You're safe. Vincent looked like he might cry. Thank you, both of you. I don't know what to say. Say you're making breakfast. Clara limped toward the kitchen, her cane tapping familiar rhythms. Because I'm starving and I know you have that good sourdough in back. She spent the next hour in the kitchen with Vincent, making eggs and toast and coffee like it was any other morning. Alessandro sat at the corner booth, the same one he'd occupied that first night, watching her move through the familiar space with something soft in his expression. Marco stood by the door, alert despite the exhaustion, because danger didn't take mornings off. Daniel slept in the SUV, wrapped in a shock blanket, preparing for whatever new life witness protection would give him. And Clara cooked breakfast for a mafia boss in an empty restaurant while dawn light filtered through dirty windows, feeling more herself than she had in years. "You're good at this," Alessandro said when she brought him a plate. "Cooking, making this place feel like home." "I was good at nursing too, before the accident." Clara sat across from him, stealing a piece of toast. "Maybe I'll go back to it someday. When my spine's healed enough. When things are less complicated." "Things are always complicated in my world." "Then I guess I'll have to get used to it." Clara met his eyes. "Or you'll have to get used to having someone around who demands you be more than just a monster." "That's a tall order." "I know, but you paid for 6 months of physical therapy with the best specialist in the city. Least you can do is try to be human for me." Alessandro almost smiled again, and Clara decided she'd make it her personal mission to turn those almost smiles into real ones. They finished breakfast as Jessica arrived for her shift, did a double take at seeing them, and immediately launched into excited questions about the rumors she'd heard. Claire deflected with practiced ease, years of nursing training making her excellent at managing concerned inquiries without revealing anything real. Finally, Agent Williams called. Time for official statements. Time to turn the night's chaos into legal paperwork. Alessandro drove Clara to the federal building himself, Marco following in a second car with Daniel. The FBI offices were sterile and fluorescent and exactly what Clara expected. Bureaucracy wearing a badge. She spent 3 hours answering questions, walking Agent Williams through every detail of the last month, from that first night at Belenate to the warehouse ambush. A stenographer recorded everything. Lawyers hovered. Someone brought terrible coffee. When they finally let her leave, it was almost noon. Alessandro was waiting in the lobby, looking haggard but present. "They want Daniel for another 2 hours," he said. "Witness protection arrangements. But you're done. They have everything they need." "What about you?" "I've been answering federal questions for 12 years. They'll never have everything they need from me." Alessandro stood, offering his hand. "But for today, we're done. Come on, I'm taking you home." "Your home or mine?" "Whichever one you want to wake up in tomorrow." Clara thought about it. About her studio with its familiar brokenness. About Alessandro's penthouse with its view of the harbor and photograph of a dead girl who'd changed everything. "Yours," she said, "at least until I can walk without wanting to die. Then we'll figure out something more permanent." They drove through afternoon traffic, exhaustion finally overwhelming adrenaline. Clara dozed against the window, her body demanding rest her mind wasn't ready to accept. When they reached this penthouse, Alessandro carried her inside despite her protests, his arms careful around her broken body. He deposited her on the guest room bed, removed her shoes, pulled a blanket over her. "Sleep," he ordered gently. "Everything else can wait." Clara caught his hand before he could leave. "Stay, just for a few minutes, until I fall asleep." Alessandro hesitated, then sat on the edge of the bed, his hand in hers, his presence solid and real and alive. "We survived," Clara said, her eyes already closing. "We did. That's got to count for something. It counts for everything." Alessandro's thumb traced circles on her palm. "Sleep, Clara. I'll be here when you wake up." And he was. When Clara finally woke, 6 hours later, groggy and disoriented, Alessandro was still sitting on the edge of the bed, his head tilted back against the wall, eyes closed, her hand still held in his. Like even in sleep, he couldn't quite let go. Clara watched him for a long moment. This dangerous man who'd built an empire on fear and was slowly learning to build something else instead. His face was softer in sleep, younger, the hardness stripped away to reveal something almost vulnerable. She thought about the month that had led them here. The terror and violence and impossible choices. The way he'd looked at her that first night like she was a ghost come back to haunt him. The way he looked at her now, like she was the first real thing he'd seen in years. Maybe Daniel had been right. Maybe Alessandro had only noticed her because she reminded him of Lucia. But maybe that was okay. Maybe second chances at redemption were still worth taking, even if they started with ghosts. Outside, South Harbor continued its complicated existence. crime and hope, and people trying to survive braided together so tightly you couldn't separate them. The Calibri family was in custody. New threats would emerge. The cycle would continue. But for now, in this moment, Clara was safe. Alessandro was alive. And that was enough. She closed her eyes again, drifting back toward sleep, still holding the hand of a man who'd learned to be human again because a broken waitress reminded him what it felt like. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Federal trials. Witness statements. Healing that would take months. But tonight, they'd both survived. And sometimes, survival was all the victory you could ask for. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of voices arguing in Italian. Late afternoon light slanted through the guest room windows, painting everything gold. Her spine throbbed with the deep ache that meant she'd pushed too hard, moved too much, survived things her broken body wasn't designed to survive. She limped toward the voices, her cane finding familiar rhythm against hardwood floors. Alessandro's office was full of men in dark suits. His lieutenants, Clara recognized some from Belinate. Marco stood near the window. Dominic leaned against the wall, arms crossed. 3 others she didn't know occupied the remaining space, all talking at once in rapid Italian that sounded like controlled fury. They stopped when she entered. Alessandro looked up from the desk, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. "You should be resting." "I've been resting for 6 hours. What's happening?" The silence that followed was heavy with things no one wanted to say. Finally, Marco spoke. "The Bernardi family is making a move. With Calibri in federal custody, they see an opportunity. They're claiming South Harbor territory, saying Mr. Moretti's protection agreements are void now that he's cooperating with the FBI. Clara felt ice slide through her veins. "So we stopped one war and started another." "That's how it works," Alessandro said flatly. "Power vacuums fill themselves. Vincent Calibri controlled 6 neighborhoods. Now those neighborhoods are up for grabs and everyone wants a piece. Including you?" "No." Alessandro's voice was tired. "I'm done expanding, but the Bernardi family doesn't believe that. They think I'm positioning to take everything Calibri had, so they're moving first before I can consolidate." One of the lieutenants, older man, scar across his cheek, spoke in heavily accented English. "We must respond, show strength. If we appear weak, others will attack. And if we respond with violence, the FBI revokes their cooperation agreement and everyone goes to prison," Alessandro countered. "We're walking a line so thin one wrong move destroys everything." "Then what do we do?" Dominic asked. "Let them take our territory? Let them push until we have nothing left?" Alessandro rubbed his face, the gesture so exhausted it made Clara's chest tight. "I don't know yet, but I'm not starting another war. Not after last night. Not after—" He broke off, glancing at Clara. "Not anymore." The lieutenants exchanged looks that Clara couldn't quite read. Concern, maybe. Or disappointment. Or both. "Meeting's over," Alessandro said. "I need time to think. Everyone out except Marco." The room cleared slowly, men filing past Clara with expressions ranging from respectful to skeptical. When they were gone, Alessandro slumped in his chair like a puppet with cut strings. "How bad is it really?" Clara asked. "Bad. The Bernardi family has been waiting for an opening like this for years. They're going to push hard and fast, try to take as much as they can before anyone stops them." Alessandro looked at her. "Which means the people I protect, restaurant owners, shopkeepers, people like Vincent, they're all vulnerable now. All targets. So protect them differently, without violence. There is no protection without violence in this world. That's the fundamental equation. The threat of force is the only language these people understand. Then teach them a new language." Clara moved closer, ignoring the pain in her leg. "You just helped the FBI dismantle an entire crime family. You have credibility with them now. Use it. Turn the Bernardi family's aggression into a federal case. Make cooperation more profitable than war." Marco was nodding slowly. "She's right. If we document every move Bernardi makes, extortion, threats, violence, and feed it to the FBI, they'll have to respond. We use the system against them instead of our own men." "That's not how this works," Alessandro said, but his voice lacked conviction. "It's how it works now." Clara sat on the edge of his desk. "Because you're not the same person you were a month ago. You chose not to execute Vincent Calibri. You chose to let federal agents witness everything. You chose me over being the monster. So choose differently now. Build something that doesn't require blood to maintain." Alessandro stared at her for a long moment. Then quietly, "You're asking me to dismantle everything I've built, everything I've been for 12 years. I'm asking you to build something better, something Lucia would have been proud of instead of terrified by." The name landed like a punch. Alessandro flinched, his jaw tight. "Don't use her like that." "Like what? Like someone who'd want you to be more than a killer?" Clara's voice was sharp. "She's why you started this. She's why you became what you are. Don't act like invoking her name is manipulation when she's the reason you're sitting in this office in the first place." Alessandro stood abruptly, rage and pain warring across his face. "You don't get to tell me what my sister would have wanted. You didn't know her. You don't know what her death cost me." "You're right. I don't." Clara stood too, facing him despite the height difference. "But I know what her death made you, and I know you hate it. I see it in your eyes every time you look at that photograph. You're not mourning who she was. You're mourning who you could have been if she'd lived. Get out. No. Clara, I'm warning you. Warn me all you want. I'm not leaving." Clara's voice broke. "Because someone has to stand here and tell you the truth. That you've been using grief as an excuse to be brutal for 12 years. That Lucia dying didn't require you to become a monster. You chose that. And you can choose differently now. But you have to actually choose, not hide behind her memory like it's armor." The silence that followed was devastating. Alessandro's hands were shaking. His eyes were wet. For a moment, Clara thought he might hit something, or her. Instead, he turned away, shoulders tight, breathing hard. "I killed 37 people in the first year after she died," he said quietly. "Dismantled 2 families, burned businesses to the ground, tortured men until they begged for death." His voice was hollow. "I told myself it was justice, protection, making sure no one else died the way Lucia did. But really, I was just making the world hurt as much as I hurt. I know. And you still want me to be better? After everything I am, everything I've done? I don't want you to be better." Clara moved closer, putting her hand on his back. "I want you to want to be better. There's a difference." Alessandro turned, and his face was raw with 12 years of grief finally breaking through the armor. "I don't know how. I don't know how to be anything except this." "Then let me show you." Clara's hand moved to his face, careful and gentle. "One choice at a time. One day where you choose building instead of destroying. That's all. That's the only way change happens." Alessandro looked at her like she was offering him something impossible. "And if I fail? If I make the wrong choice and people die because of it? Then you try again the next day. That's what being human means, failing and trying anyway." Marco cleared his throat from across the room. "For what it's worth, boss, she's right. The old way kept us alive, but made us into things we hated. Maybe the new way gets us killed, but at least we die as something better." Alessandro closed his eyes, breathing hard. When he opened them again, something had shifted. Not softness, he'd never be soft, but maybe the beginning of something like hope. "Okay," he said. "We do it your way. Document everything Bernardi does. Build a federal case. Try to end this without more bodies." He looked at Marco. "But if it goes wrong, if people get hurt because we were too cautious, that's on me." "That's on all of us," Marco corrected. "We're making this choice together." Clara felt something unclench in her chest. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was possibility. The next 3 weeks were brutal in ways that didn't involve gunfire. Alessandro's organization transformed from an empire built on fear into something closer to an intelligence network. His men documented every move the Bernardi family made: shakedowns, threats, assaults. They recorded conversations, took photographs, built cases that would stand up in federal court. And they didn't retaliate. Not once. Even when Bernardi soldiers burned a shop under Moretti protection. Even when they beat a restaurant owner who refused to switch allegiances. Alessandro's lieutenants hated it, called it weakness, said they were losing respect, losing territory, losing everything that made them feared. But Alessandro held the line, and slowly, grudgingly, his men followed. Clara watched it all from the penthouse, attending physical therapy sessions with Dr. Chen 3 times a week and seeing progress that felt miraculous. Her spine was healing properly for the first time in 3 years. The pain was receding. She could walk for hours without wanting to die. Dr. Chen said if she kept improving, she might not need the cane by spring. Daniel had disappeared into witness protection. New name, new city, new life. He'd left Clara a letter before he went. Simple words that carried years of regret. I'm sorry for everything. I'll try to be better. Ask me again in a year. Clara kept the letter in her pocket like a promise waiting to be tested. Agent Williams called weekly, updating them on the Calibri prosecution. The case was airtight. Vincent and 7 of his top lieutenants were facing federal racketeering charges that would put them away for decades. The trial would start in 6 months. And then, 3 weeks after the warehouse shootout, everything came to a head. Clara was leaving physical therapy when the black van pulled up alongside her. No warning. No time to react, just the door sliding open and hands grabbing her, pulling her inside before Tony could reach her. She fought, nails and teeth and her cane as a weapon. But there were 3 of them, and 1 of her, and her body was still broken enough that strength failed quickly. They zip-tied her wrists, threw a hood over her head. The van was moving before she could scream. She tried to track the route by turns and stops, but panic was overwhelming logic. All she knew was they drove for maybe 20 minutes before stopping, and then she was being dragged into a building that smelled like oil and metal. The hood came off. Clara blinked in fluorescent light, trying to orient herself. She was in an auto shop, empty, abandoned, tools scattered across workbenches. 3 men in dark suits surrounded her, and sitting on a stool in front of her, calm as if conducting a business meeting, was an older man with silver hair and cold eyes. Anthony Bernardi, the patriarch, the man whose family was trying to carve up Alessandro's territory. Miss Rossi, he said pleasantly, we need to have a conversation. Clara's heart was hammering, but she kept her voice steady. Alessandro will kill you for this. Will he? He's been surprisingly restrained lately, almost passive. Some might say weak. Anthony smiled. I think you've made him soft, Miss Rossi. And soft men don't survive in our world. Then you don't know him at all. I know him well enough. I know he's been different since he started protecting you. More cautious, more human. Anthony leaned forward. And humanity is a weakness I'm going to exploit. Clara felt ice in her veins but forced herself to meet his eyes. What do you want? I want you to deliver a message. Tell Alessandro that I'm taking South Harbor. All of it. His protection agreements are void. His territory is mine. And if he resists, I'll kill everyone he's ever protected, starting with you. He won't negotiate. Then people will die. A lot of people. And their blood will be on his hands because he chose you over them. Anthony's smile widened. That's the choice, Miss Rossi. He can let me have what I want and you live. Or he can fight back and watch everyone he cares about die slowly while he's powerless to stop it. That's not a choice. That's terrorism. Semantics. Anthony stood, brushing off his pants. You have 48 hours to convince him. After that, I start sending pieces of his protected businesses back to him. Literally. The men grabbed Clara again, hood going back over her head. She was dragged back to the van, driven somewhere else, then dumped on a sidewalk in a neighborhood she didn't immediately recognize. When she pulled off the hood, she was 3 blocks from Belenate. Her phone was in her pocket, miraculously intact. She called Tony first. He arrived in under 2 minutes, his face pale with fear and fury. Then she called Alessandro. He answered on the first ring. Where are you? Safe. I'm safe. Bernardi grabbed me, but they let me go. They wanted me to deliver a message. Clara's voice was shaking. Alessandro, they're going to kill everyone you protect, unless you back down completely. The silence on the other end was terrible. Are you hurt? Alessandro's voice was very quiet. No, scared, but not hurt. Good. Stay with Tony. I'm coming to you. He arrived 15 minutes later with Marco and 6 other men, pulling up in a convoy that looked like a military operation. Alessandro was out of the car before it fully stopped, his hands on Clara's face, checking for injuries with careful fingers. I'm okay, she said. But Alessandro, you have to listen. I heard the message. Tony recorded your call. Alessandro's expression was empty, inhuman. The monster she'd seen glimpses of fully surfaced. They made a mistake. They thought taking you would make me weak. Instead, they just reminded me what I'm capable of when someone threatens what's mine. You said you were done with violence. I'm done with unnecessary violence. This is very necessary. Alessandro's eyes were flat. They took you, put their hands on you, threatened to kill you. There's no walking back from that. So what, you're just going to start a war? After 3 weeks of trying to do things differently? I'm going to end a war, permanently. Alessandro turned to Marco. Call Williams. Tell her we have information on a major Bernardi operation happening tonight. Drug shipment, weapons deal, whatever makes her move fastest. Then position our people at every business we protect. If Bernardi's men try anything, we respond with every legal tool we have and call the police immediately. And if that doesn't work, Marco asked, then I stop trying to be better and become what I need to be to keep everyone alive. Alessandro looked at Clara. Even if it means you hate me for it. Clara grabbed his arm. I won't hate you for protecting people, but I'll hate you for using me as an excuse to go back to being the monster. Don't do that. Don't let them win by making you choose violence. They already made me choose by touching you. Then choose smarter, Clara's voice was sharp. You have 3 weeks of documented evidence against Bernardi. You have federal agents who trust your information. You have leverage that doesn't require anyone dying. Use it. Be the person who solves this without blood for once. Alessandro stared at her, conflict raw across his face. Then, slowly, he pulled out his phone and called Agent Williams himself. I have information on Anthony Bernardi, he said. Major RICO violations, kidnapping, extortion. And I have 3 weeks of documentation proving all of it. How fast can you move? Clara could hear Williams' response, sharp questions, demands for details. Alessandro answered each one precisely, his voice calm despite the rage underneath. When he hung up, he looked at Clara. FBI's moving tonight. They'll arrest Anthony Bernardi and his top people on federal charges. It'll take them off the board long enough to stabilize things. Will it be enough? I don't know. But it's what you wanted, what you asked me to try. Alessandro's expression was bleak. So I'm trying, even though every instinct I have is screaming to go to that auto shop and put a bullet in Anthony Bernardi's skull. Thank you, Clara said quietly, for choosing differently. Don't thank me yet. If this goes wrong, if people die because I was too cautious, that's on both of us. They spent the next 6 hours in Alessandro's penthouse, surrounded by his men, waiting for news. Clara paced despite her legs screaming, unable to sit still. Alessandro made phone calls in 3 languages, coordinating with his people across the city. Around midnight, Agent Williams called. Alessandro put it on speaker. Talk to me. We have Anthony Bernardi in custody, 7 of his lieutenants. We raided 3 locations based on your intelligence and found enough evidence to charge them with racketeering, kidnapping, drug trafficking, and about 15 other federal crimes. Williams' voice was satisfied. This is going to take down the entire Bernardi operation. Good work, Moretti. Alessandro closed his eyes briefly. What about the rest of his people? The soldiers who were threatening protected businesses? We're picking them up now. Most are cooperating once they realize their bosses aren't coming back. By morning, the Bernardi family will be finished as a criminal organization. Thank you, Agent Williams. Thank Miss Rossi. She's the one who convinced you to work with us instead of against us. Williams paused. For what it's worth, Moretti, I prefer this version of you, the one who solves problems without bodies. Keep it up. She hung up. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Marco started laughing, relieved, exhausted laughter that sounded like it hurt. We did it. We actually did it. Ended 2 crime families without starting a war. 3 crime families, Dominic corrected, Calibri, Bernardi, and we just dismantled our own organization into something that doesn't operate like one anymore. Alessandro looked around at his men, the lieutenants who'd followed him for years, who'd killed for him, who'd built an empire on fear at his command. Anyone have a problem with how we're doing things now? Silence. Then slowly, one by one, his men shook their heads. It's different, the older lieutenant with the scar said. But different might be better. At least we're not waiting to be shot in the back by rivals anymore. Alessandro nodded once. Then we keep moving forward. No more expansion, no more wars. We protect what we have, document everything, and work with the feds when necessary. Anyone who can't live with that can leave now with my blessing and a reference. No one moved. Good. Meeting's over. Everyone go home, get sleep. Tomorrow we start rebuilding. Alessandro looked at Marco. Make sure all the protected businesses know they're safe. No threats from Bernardi. No retaliation needed. Everything's handled. The room cleared slowly, men filing out with expressions that ranged from relief to cautious optimism. When they were gone, Alessandro sank into his chair, the exhaustion finally overwhelming everything else. Clara moved to him, her hand on his shoulder. You did it. You chose differently and it worked. This time, Alessandro's voice was hollow. Next time might not work. Next time people might die because I was too cautious. Then we'll deal with next time when it comes. Clara knelt in front of him, ignoring the pain in her leg. But tonight, you saved everyone without becoming the monster. That counts. Alessandro looked at her and his eyes were wet. I don't know how to do this. How to be someone different after being one thing for so long. No one does. That's why it's called change instead of transformation. It's messy and slow, and you fail constantly. Clara took his hands. But you try anyway, that's all I'm asking. Just keep trying. Alessandro pulled her up into his lap, his arms around her, his face buried in her hair. They sat like that for a long time, two broken people holding each other while the city outside continued its complicated existence. 3 months later, Clara walked into Bell and 8 without her cane for the first time. The restaurant erupted in applause, Vincent wiping tears, Jessica screaming, regular customers she'd served for 3 years standing to celebrate. Dr. Chen had warned her not to overdo it, that healing was ongoing, that she'd always have limitations. But she was walking, really walking, no assistance, no pain that made her want to die. It felt like resurrection. Alessandro was waiting at the corner booth, the same one he'd occupied that first night, but now his expression was soft instead of cold. Now when he looked at her, she saw something like peace instead of grief. Clara slid into the seat across from him. I did it. You did. Alessandro's smile was genuine now, not the almost smiles she'd fought for months to earn. Dr. Chen says you might even be able to go back to nursing if you want. I've been thinking about that. Clara stole a piece of bread from his plate, thinking maybe I could do something different, something that uses both the nursing and everything I've learned about this world. Like what? Like a clinic. Free medical care for people in neighborhoods like this. No questions asked, no judgment. Clara met his eyes. People in your world get hurt and can't go to hospitals without police getting involved. They need somewhere safe. I could provide that. Alessandro was quiet for a long moment. You want to open a clinic for criminals. I want to open a clinic for people who need help. Some of them will be criminals. Some will be victims. Most will be both. Clara's voice was steady. And I want you to fund it. Put the money you used to spend on violence into something that actually helps people. That's a hell of an ask. I know. But you said you wanted to build something better. This is better. This is what Lucia would have wanted. Alessandro flinched at the name, but not like he used to. The wound was still there, but healing, same as Clara's spine. Okay, he said finally. We'll do it. Find a location. I'll handle the funding and logistics. We'll call it Lucia's Clinic. Lucia's Clinic, Clara repeated, testing the words. She'd like that. She would have loved you. Alessandro's voice was soft. You're exactly the kind of person she always tried to be. Fearless and reckless, and convinced you could fix the world by caring enough. Did it work for her? No, she died trying. Alessandro looked out the window at South Harbor, still rough, still dangerous, but somehow less hopeless than it had been 3 months ago. But maybe it'll work for you. You're more stubborn than she was. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me. I've said a lot of nice things. Not really. Mostly you've said things like, stay here where it's safe and stop doing stupid things, and you're going to get yourself killed. All true statements. Alessandro reached across the table, taking her hand.